Okay, we want to welcome everyone to council committee meeting. We'll call this meeting to order. Does anyone have any additions for the agenda? I think we'll add one. Councillor Harker's been talking to me. We'll add a COVID-19 addition. Put that at the end. We'll go on to delegations. Go ahead.
Can I add, I want speak a little bit about cemetery at the end there,
Cemetery too.
if I could please.
Anyone else? You guys are all in little pictures. There you go. Anybody else have anything? If not, we'll move on. We're going to move to delegations. You see there's a new one, 3.1, the Boulevard Parking Challenges. Mark Boltazar is here. We're going to turn the time over to him to talk to us. So go ahead, Mark.
Okay, perfect. First of all, I'd just like to introduce myself. My name is Mark Boltazar. Just started with the town about 3 weeks ago as the new community development officer here. And like to, in the next couple of weeks, just to get to know me, ask me questions, feel free. But right now, let's take care of some stuff that's been on my plate, and it's the boulevard parking. So as of Tuesday, had a little bit of a changeover from who will be kind of administering the boulevard parking stuff from Abe Tinney to myself. So he kind of gave me the background. Yeah, so he kind of gave me the background of why this bylaw was kind of created and the reason behind it. So I'm here to basically discuss some clarification to make sure that I implement this in the right way that it was intended, and make sure that we get the right information to the public. So what I'm kind of seeking clarification on is in regards to some of the underlying land use bylaw rules and regulations that are in place that have kind of come in conflict with the boulevard parking. So in the land use bylaw, it basically trumps everything in the development realm. And some of the two main things that we're dealing with is two standards in the land use bylaw, which are in the residential zone. You're only permitted one driveway per lot, and the driveway width right now is a maximum of 24 feet wide. So some of these boulevard parking applications that I've been having have the boulevard parking with either in a location where there's two driveways and one of them is a boulevard parking spot, or the fact is that the boulevard parking spot contravenes the 24 mat foot width maximum, and we need to kind of make a decision there. And normally, if you want a waiver for 24 feet and go larger, which we possibly can, is that the normal modus of operandum there is to have a discretionary waiver, and that is done through the Municipal Planning Commission and not internally in our office. So I've been kind of looking at getting approvals for these boulevard parking spots, but there might need to be some MPC meetings for some of these because they are in contravention of the land use bylaw. So, bit of a, yeah, so I just wanted to maybe get your input, maybe a few examples on what should be kind of approved and going to MPC if we need to from there. So,
Is there a way you could pull that bylaw up? We could take a look at it.
Curtis, if I remember right, Bonnie and her name escaped me at the time. Pam, we're working on changing that width from 24 feet to 30 feet.
Yeah.
But has that taken place yet? Do we know, or?
No, it hasn't taken place because they were trying to wait until there was a bunch of items that they could do all at the same time, because revising the land
Okay.
use bylaw requires public hearings, and so
Yeah.
it's more difficult than just having 3 motions in council. To date, that just hasn't happened yet, and so it's still technically 24 feet, even though the desire at the time was to bump that up to 30, so that all those applications wouldn't have to keep coming to council, or to the municipal
There's
planning
a
commission.
scale as well, though. So the scale would be depending on the size of the property, could be up to 30 feet, yeah. But it's so right now, anybody would, they'd have to come through for waivers.
Until that gets changed.
Correct.
Yeah, so maybe, for example, we have, Jim, can I maybe you as an example?
Sure.
Okay, so Jim, our Mayor Depew has an application for boulevard parking on a surface that is improved to asphalt on the north side of your home. And so I think the legislation is in place to reward those people who have improved those boulevard parking spots and to continue them to use that spot that they currently have. And so right now, Mayor Depew is application is so in the land use bylaw, we have that there's only one driveway is permitted per lot, and a secondary driveway would then require a waiver to do so. However, there's no checking the history of your lot. So when you built your home, we have records to about 2011, and so there's no way of back checking whether that development permit was ever issued with true driveways or not. And so it's difficult for me to approve those because in the land use bylaw, it has that you should only have one driveway per lot kind of thing, right? So in those instances, do we need to go and have Mayor Depew apply for a waiver for the land use bylaw on top of the boulevard parking? Does that make sense?
Yes, when we first talked about this, didn't we talk about those should be grandfathered in, those ones that were already existing?
We did. The problem though is that the one bylaw amendments we did to bylaw 968-10 are in contravention of our land use bylaw, and the land use bylaw is the trumping document.
Okay. So scroll down so we can see towards the end of this. So obviously, in
So
your bylaw committee, you didn't talk about this, eh?
Nope.
We were waiting for Pam and Bonnie, were gonna get back to us, were they not, on getting that changed?
Just on the 30-foot thing,
Just on 30-foot thing, okay,
not on the multiple driveways.
okay.
Keep scrolling. I think it's at the very end. Does anybody else have a comment up there? See, Councillor Foss?
Mayor. I was just gonna ask if the remedy for this be to work this into those amendments proposed for the land use, so that it's instead of a separate bylaw that's guiding the decisions on this, it's all kind of worked into an improved land use.
It is frustrating to have bylaws that contradict the land use bylaw, you know? There's something has to be done about that, no question.
So I guess what we're recommending is potentially, if council is in favor of this, basically putting a pause on this process and allowing us to review how best to handle these competing issues, and potentially bringing a revised land use bylaw application to council for you guys to amend and approve, and we'll try to fast track other changes so that we can do it all together. That will require a public hearing. So in short, a pause on the enforcement of this until we can bring it back in a more complete.
I think so.
So that won't happen until next week when we can make a motion on this, we're just,
Correct. But we're just letting you know that we'll just accept applications and we're not gonna be acting on them until we get this straightened out, and then we'll work through them individually.
everybody okay with that?
I just brought my application in tonight because I have the same deal. But I don't have more than one driveway. I just have one driveway, but I've got, some extended parking on the boulevard on either side of my driveway.
Right, and would you say that's kind of close to 24 feet or probably a little bit more?
Oh, it's way more.
Way more, right? And so, just as a more of an education thing, I would say that would it appear that the boulevard application form that you filled out, would you consider that if you were to be approved for this, that you would have right to a wider driveway? Like if you submit this, are you expecting that, okay, you're gonna have a decision to be grandfathered in on the wider driveway?
No, because my driveway does not exceed 24 feet, but I just got the extra parking. It's strictly on the boulevard, and I don't expect it to be ever a driveway.
It ever like extended onto your property then?
Right.
Right, so you don't ever expect that to go.
Right, no, it's strictly boulevard parking.
Okay.
So I think it fits with the application.
Okay.
I have only one driveway, even though I have a corner lot.
Yes, okay, yeah. And your actual driveway on your property is 24 feet?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
But your parking on your boulevard has definitely improved
Absolutely.
the property, definitely,
25 times nicer than it used to be.
yes.
Yeah.
So it's a huge improvement.
Okay. So any other questions for Mark on this? I guess they'll bring it back to us in the future and we'll discuss it. So it's gonna be on pause right now for what you're doing.
How many of these applications did we have in?
Yeah, so we have 14 applications in for this year. Most of them have been in the last week, I would say. And of those 14, we have already denied 4, have approved 6, and have, I believe, 6 pending.
Okay.
So,
Can you
reason for denial?
clarify on what grounds the denials were? Just curious.
yeah, so the ones that have been denied were already because it just strictly hasn't been approved or improved, right? So it's more of what this intention of this bylaw was brought about, right? So it was.
Parking on the grass.
Yes, yeah. And I think that the only minor thing is the conflict we have is just is that if it is improved, then how do we go about getting them the proper approval that is the proper process in the land use bylaw? So that's where the catch up is there.
Okay.
Yeah.
So for the policy committee, we need to compare this to the land use bylaw.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mayor,
Councillor Harker, yes.
I submitted an application to Abe. I haven't heard anything. Does that mean it got lost? Abe, did you get that? That was like, probably almost a week ago.
Yes.
I emailed it to you. Did you get it?
Joe and I do have your application. Yes, it's been passed. It's been passed to me.
I'm just checking. Okay, that's good. I just wanted to make sure it didn't get lost. Thank you.
Yeah.
All good.
She's old school. Okay. So any other questions for Mark? I don't have to work through this and this will come back to us. Well, thanks, Mark, for coming in.
Welcome aboard, Mark.
It's a good time on board.
Yeah.
Thank you guys.
Nice to meet you. One last question. Did we get in applications for all of the cases that we cited in town? Are there
No.
more instances of boulevard parking that people didn't apply for?
Yes, so I think there's a few out there that I've had a lot of questions on, and whether they should apply or not and stuff. So I think there's a few out there that still need to come in,
Okay.
and so they're kind of rushing for that April 30th deadline. So I think I just wanted to make sure that we had solid grounds and information going out to the public, so that this was implemented correctly, right?
Okay.
And so I was running into those issues. So.
I'll leave my application there tonight.
Yeah. Thanks.
Okay, well, thank you. So our next delegation is Ken Steed from
Hey, Mark, I didn't realize that it was a double driveway.
I built a triple car
Oh,
garage
did you?
on the side of our house on the north side, but it was part of the permit when I built, because I had to have exclusive, because it's not in the right place, we had to move it over, so I was given that exemption. And also in it was the width, because it's a triple car garage, and it's a triple wide. And it's my second driveway
Yeah.
of three.
There's lots out
Cases
there.
abounding, aren't there?
There's lots out there, it's not the only ones.
Happy birthday, by the way.
Thank you. I had a good birthday, it was fun,
Good.
neighbors were
What
wonderful.
kind of birthday?
If any, Sunday.
Sunday.
Mine was Sunday and Cynthia's is tomorrow. We're 3 days apart in a year.
My son's is tomorrow. Why?
Oh, I remember that.
Yeah.
And Bronwyn Freeze.
Yeah.
There's a bunch of them on Cynthia's birthday.
We're all the same, we're together, they all have the same birthday.
Okay, we're gonna turn the time over to Ken then to talk to him about, emergency plan, so go ahead, Ken.
Thank you very much. I assume this is going public too, so I should introduce myself. I'm Ken Steig. My current position in town is the Director of Emergency Management. I've been in this position for about 10 years, working as the deputy and as the director, and it's a pleasure to be with you tonight. What I would ask is that if you have questions, I assume the agenda has been passed around. You've had a chance to see the agenda plus the attachments. That's my assumption, okay. You notice the very last item on my outline, it's questions and answers. What I would ask that as we're going through this, if you have specific questions about something I'm addressing, please ask it as we're going.
Okay.
Don't hang on to it, delay thinking about it until we're all done. And if you have any questions or any direction for me or anything about specific to the presentation, please, let's do it as we go along, okay? It's not an interruption. I think it's required. The aim for tonight is to update the council on the COVID-19 action and to help council prepare for future recovery. I have no intentions whatsoever of discussing in detail all the restrictions, directions, benefits promulgated by each level of government during COVID-19. We've all heard them. Every day we hear about the numbers of people tested, infected, hospitalized, or cured of COVID-19. I would like to make one clarification though on that I've in conversation with some people in town and others about the numbers tested and their location. I just want it to be clear that everyone understands when you're reading the reports or hearing them through the media, the location of that person that's been tested is not where they live, it's not where they work, it's where they were tested. So as you go through that by zone or within the subcategories of each zone, it's just wherever they were tested. So for instance, Calgary's numbers are really, really high. All those people, they don't live in Calgary. They just were tested there. So Calgary's numbers. So some of the statistics you're looking at are a tad skewed. As long as everybody understands that, that's just fine. So it can be a little bit deceptive if you're not aware that the statistics show where people were tested. Now let's review some of the things that Raymond has done and some of these we have not done and some of the preparations for the recovery phase. If you recall, we had a meeting here in the town of Raymond on the 13th of March. I've included the agenda that we followed in that meeting. It was well attended, excellent conversation, lots of agreement, and action was taken from it. And I believe the town is better off for having had the meeting and the action that's come for it. The aim at that time that we discussed, and it has not changed, it is to ensure the safety, peace, security, health, and prosperity of the residents of Raymond. COVID-19 has challenged this aim. However, I've been very, very impressed with the cooperation of the residents of Raymond. Many of our residents have been hurt by this virus and the isolation and containment necessary to slow down and stop the spread of it. It's now time to add some hope and some optimism to this situation. Our future recovery plan has already started and we're ready to begin it.
I also covered the town infrastructure priorities. The critical and key infrastructure have all been maintained in our town during this virus. However, most individuals, families, and town businesses have been negatively impacted. On the 24th of March, I sent an email out to council, the mayor, and some senior staff
normally for two reasons. The first is if we need extra legal authority, and that's from section 19, paragraph 1 of the Emergency Management Act. Or the second reason is for the provision of liability protection for elected officials and key staff. And with that, I want to make a slight clarification. We all know, and we've discussed it in council before, that we are protected by the Emergency Management Act with or without a state of local emergency if we act in good faith and make logical and reasonable decisions based on the information we have at the time. However, I like the clarity and security of our protection when a state of local emergency is declared. Update you on what's going on today. State of local emergency declarations as of this morning, there were 67 COVID-19 related state of local emergencies declared in our province. Calgary being the first to declare one on the 15th of March, Lethbridge on the 18th of March, and Edmonton following on the 20th of March. Up till today, we also have, that's 67, also have today 10 state of local emergencies because of flooding and related ice jams and problems in the province. Most of those are in the north. So we have 77 current state of local emergencies. Seems like a large number when you think 77 state of local emergencies in a province and Raymond doesn't have one. However, we also need to recognize that we have 264 urban communities, 69 counties, and 45 First Nations, which is a total of 378 possible state of local emergencies in the province, and we only have 77 declared. That hopefully put it in perspective for us all. Raymond has not declared a state of local emergency yet. It has not been necessary. Now, this may be counterintuitive to a lot of residents of Raymond and the council, but we may have to declare a state of local emergency when we begin the recovery process. Some people already question me on that. Why would you do it as part of recovery when we didn't have a state of local emergency during the pandemic? It just is counterintuitive. Again, it goes back to the two reasons why we declare a state. We may need those extra legal coverages for the council and our senior staff, and we also may need a little bit of extra protection, particularly and especially if the town decides to change the easing of restrictions that are announced by the federal and provincial government and make them different. So if towns decide to make either soften them or harden them, I would recommend immediately that we declare a state of local emergency because you will need that protection. Okay, and we'll go through that in some detail. I also included in the package the pandemic and the pandemic recovery checklists. The statements should be there. I don't know if the public can see them or if they're available to them, but they should be there for you. These checklists I wrote as a guide. It's true that people are our top priority. However, our critical infrastructure must be retained or we cannot survive as a town. So when you go down the checklist, you'll see that it refers to both the infrastructure requirements as we have categorized them, plus the people element. I'd like to refer specifically to the recovery plan summary. Could you put that up for us, please? The recovery. Thank you. Can you see it? Oh, that's excellent. Thank you very much. The aim is to resume normal activities. I want to talk about what the word normal means. I don't want to take your time tonight for a long time, but if you remember traveling by air a number of years ago, checked their baggage, went to security, they opened your handbag, no weapons, no sharp items, go through, have a nice flight. You had your Subway sandwich with you, or your Tim Hortons with you, and your large glass of whatever your favorite beverage is. No problem. You remember those years? We had some terrorist activity and everything changed. What they called it was, now this is a new normal after that terrorist activity. So what's it like going on a flight now? Take your belt buckle off, take your shoes off. You can't have a tube of toothpaste. You can't have a thing of water.
A bottle of water.
Exactly. So that's a new normal now. And there was a lot of objection at the time, people understood it. Back in the olden days, if you're taking your granddaughter for a flight and she was all excited about airplanes, you go and talk to the pilot, he'd show them to you. Do you think you can do that today? So what we have today, and that's why I'm making this analogy, is this is the new normal. Well, as we're going through this pandemic now, heading towards recovery, don't look for the old normal. It may never happen. We may have a target of shooting towards a new normal. So when you go down that checklist that I prepared for you, you can't think we're going to go back to having Raymond or the province or the country or international travel you may take as the old normal. It may be modified like our air travel has been modified to a new normal, okay? So I think if we go into this whole recovery process with that in mind, and the decision this council makes with that in mind, I think it'll facilitate where we're going and what's going on, and particularly for the chief administration officer and communication officer who have to promulgate the decisions as they come out. So we need to have that concept in our mind of a new normal. However, the changes we do make need to be made in an efficient and an effective manner, and I recommend that we do it in concert with the province of Alberta. My heart goes out to Lloydminster, but they follow Saskatchewan rules and regulations. I said, therefore, I suggest, to be clear, that we neither lead nor follow behind the recovery process within the province of Alberta. The town will continue to follow the government of Alberta and Alberta Health Services direction. This is my assumption. Am I okay with that assumption as your Director of Emergency Management?
Yes, for sure.
Okay, I can count on this council to go in concert with the government of Alberta and Alberta Health Services.
I think we're only wise to do that. Like you said, it's a liability if we don't.
Huge. There may be liabilities anyway, but people will understand when they see it on the media that the federal government's doing this, the province doing this. Oh, what are you guys doing in Raymond? So if we do it in concert with them, I think we're all safer and better, and it's just simply better for everybody. Particularly when you recognize that people live in so many different places. I'm sorry, do we have a question, sir?
Yeah,
Go ahead.
okay. I just was looking for a little clarification because you said something earlier that was surprising to me. That in a state of local emergency that we may be able to loosen restrictions before, say, the province or the federal government reduced restrictions, which is a little counterintuitive to me. I would imagine that provincial or federal restrictions would trump anything we could do locally. I just want maybe a little clarification.
No.
I was gonna ask the same question. You talked about softening restrictions and creating a state of emergency. I wrote that down.
Thank you. I can clarify that. That's actually a good point. I'm glad that you have picked it up. The province of Alberta has not declared a state of emergency. We are under a state of health. We are not under a state of emergency in the province. Therefore, every mayor and council has 100% full jurisdiction of their stewardship. If any mayor or reeve chooses to soften or harden any of the direction or guidance given to us, they still have that right, but they also have consequences from it. And that's what I was referring to.
And what would those consequences be, Mr. Steve?
Generally economic.
Yeah.
Generally economic. For instance, if the province, just as an example, if the province comes up and says, well, let's do two examples. One for sports or recreation. If the province says, we're going to restrict it to 15 and the town decides, well, that's stupid. We have groups of 24 or whatever, and they decide to go with that, your peace officers and your police are going to have a little bit of concern, but you would have the authority to do it unless the province came in and denied it and told you about it as soon as they learned about it. So you can soften and you can harden decisions. Areas of sports, another area would be businesses. if you decide that as a community, a certain business should be open for the betterment of your very own community, and it's one that's generally been restricted within the province, I would suggest if you choose to do that, I would immediately recommend that you declare a state of local emergency, because there will be some problems.
And that saves us from liability, because it seems like a liability risk for us to go against, say, provincial health orders, to say, oh, we'll do that differently here in Raymond.
It is a risk, and that's why I would suggest to you that if it's logical and reasonable to you, based on information you have, you can make that decision. But again, it'll be reviewed at a later time, like the sober second thought, and I would want to absolutely make sure that we declare the state of local emergency so you could be covered.
I have one more comment or question, Mr. Steve. At what point, how long do we go along with the province when we might be feeling like it doesn't work for our community? Like, do we go for 6 months, a year? How long do we go until we say, maybe we need to open our golf course because it's gonna put us so badly in the red that we need to do that? I mean, how does that look? What do we do? How long do we go?
Yeah, it's really, really hard for me to forecast something like that, but I will tell you, in a conference call this afternoon with the Director of Emergency Management and some of the Chief of Staffs of some of the municipalities in Alberta, one of them in the north asked about could they or could they not open up their harbor, from their lake? Could they have boating and recreational boating right now? And could they open up their beaches? And the Provincial Operations Center Director turned the question over to Dr. Johnson, the Deputy Medical Officer, because he needed some advice from her, and she said, we haven't come out in clear direction for that. You have to look at it as a municipality, and the concept would simply be, can you keep those social distances required of us? And can you go through there and make absolutely certain that people are obeying all of the direction given us? It's up to the municipality. So there's still quite a few areas where there's some decisions that councils can make, and that would be one of them, because they haven't clarified that yet.
That's really good to know.
Another one we talked about, I think you talked about in council, it was given to me from Curtis today, was the whole concept of garage sales and yard sales. The province has not come out and said you cannot do it. They've left it up to municipalities right now. They've suggested we don't do it, but that's up to a municipality. So there are areas still where you can make decisions, and there are consequences from those.
Which is kind of interesting that you could have a garage sale, but you couldn't golf. That just blows my, I'm sorry, I'm having a problem.
Yeah, some of the decisions seem peculiar to me, but because we're looking at it from our own specific town, not as a complete province, and as mass gatherings, like large places, golf courses in large cities are different than golf courses in small southern Alberta communities. We have more space here and fewer people.
That's kind of my point exactly. Does one size fit all, Ken? Is that
Nope.
what we're led to believe? Is that what we need to do? I'm asking you.
In my personal opinion, I'm not a legal expert, but in my opinion, that's why I'm saying that if this council decides to soften or harden any of the direction or any of the suggestions by the province or Alberta Health Service, then go ahead and do those. I just want to make sure that you're covered, that's all. My job is to advise you and help you and be part of the team. That's all I'm trying to do. I'm not going to lead any decision any way. Does that help?
Any other questions for Ken on that issue? If not, he'll move on.
So just to be clear then, I can assume as your Director of Emergency Management that this council will make their decisions on recovery in concert with the province and Alberta Health Services. Is that correct?
Well, that's the way I would like to do it. I don't think I want to take on any extra liability by not following the directive of the province.
Okay, now I'm confused because didn't you just say we could soften the restrictions if we declared a state of emergency and that didn't cause us any additional liability? Did I get that wrong?
You're close. What I said was,
Okay.
if you choose to deviate from the provincial direction or Alberta Health Services and either soften or harden any of the easing of the restrictions, then in my professional opinion, it would be wise to declare a state of local emergency so that you're protected. But that state of local emergency neither hampers nor enhances your decision making. It's just to cover you for legal action or liabilities.
Got
Okay?
it. Thank you.
Okay. Communicate decisions to the town. My assumption is that we'll probably use the same method as we use to impose the restrictions, and that is the chief administration officer and the communications officer will action for the town as they have in the past. I don't personally think we need anything extraordinary. As soon as the province makes a statement, if they realize we're going to go in concert with them, communication is very, very easy. There are really no secrets to be held when we go on TV and media and put out reports every day, and people are antsy for the recovery. So I know the communication will be fast and quick. We just may need to have some clarification points from the town, and that I assume would be from the chief administration officer and the communication officer. If necessary, again, we'd have a statement by the mayor and council. Okay? The next few points are more of a warning and hopefully not an eye-opener, but just something to be aware of as we go through this recovery process. What we need to do is prepare for an unexpected second wave of COVID-19. Yes, things can always get worse. Again, I suggest we should comply with the government of Alberta and the Alberta Health Services. If you have provinces like we're having now, the province to our east is already starting the recovery process. We are not, and the province to our west is not. With the transient nature of our people, we may have some conflicts of decision making, and there may be enhanced possibility of extending the viruses because it is transmitted by contact of people. So it's possible to have a second wave. Also, if they start opening international travel, that can do it too. We also need to prepare for concurrent emergencies or disasters during recovery. For instance, today we have, obviously, as I said at the beginning of this presentation, state of local emergencies for the COVID-19. We also have 7 forest fires. Fortunately, right now, as effective today, all are under control. We have overland flooding, we have high water warnings, and in some communities, we have high turbidity and freshwater problems. So we have all those problems going on at the same time. We have COVID-19. We should be aware of that as a council and be prepared to deal with multiple emergency disasters as we're going through the recovery process. It can happen. However, to reassure you, that's my job. I will monitor it, I'll watch it, I'll always advise you, and I'll have you prepared for whatever happens, okay? What I'd like to do now, if you have any concerns or questions about anything I've said, or any direction you want to give me, I'd like to open it up to that.
Anybody have any questions?
So you looked for our assurance that we're gonna follow provincial and federal guidelines.
I
Is that
did.
what you're recommending
Oh,
as
yes.
well?
Oh, yes.
Thank you.
Same as we did coming into this, I'll do the same thing going out. We followed immediately in concert. As soon as we learned something, it came up, we did it. I talked to Curtis, Greg, we put it out. The mayor came out with a clarification statement. I think Curtis did, am I right, it's 7? Did it go as far? I think it was 7.
We have 7 updates out, yes.
Yeah, 7 updates out there, just because of the phases. Right now, for your information, it was discussed in our conference this afternoon, the province has prepared the short-term and mid-term recovery plan, and they're working on the long-term recovery plan. So they've done like I have done for this town. They've gone through a checklist and some stages. Saskatchewan came up with 5 stages and how they're going to do it, with some timing on the first few and then some flex as they go. Our province isn't quite there yet, but they're very, very close. They're hoping within 48 hours they'll be able to have their plan, short-term and mid-term, ready for us. So we can, because I can't do my plan until I get the province one, because we're going to be in concert with them. But I can certainly write a checklist for you so you'll have ahead of time an idea how we're going to go through this as we go down this and making sure we cover those boxes. And I will do that for you and prepare you and come and brief you, okay?
And I'm not reading you wrong when I read a strong recommendation to follow provincial and federal guidelines.
Thank you. That's what I really recommend.
Thank you.
I think we're opening a bad can of worms if you deviate from it. There's always some exceptions, and there's always people, particularly business people, and I don't blame them. It's their livelihood. They want to just get in there and get at it and get things going again. But it has to be organized, and I hate to say it because you know my military background, but it has to be regimented. If it is, it's clear, it's simple, and it's better for everyone in the end.
Thank you.
And that's the way the province is going to do it. I've already checked with them.
Any other questions for Ken? Okay,
Thank you for your time and support. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
we appreciate you coming. I'm sure we'll be seeing you again before this is said and done, so.
I prefer 6 at night to midnight or 2 in the morning too. We've done that before. This is a much better time.
So Ken and I have already had a phone call about this, and he's already updated me on all these things, and so this is kind of old news for me, but it's all new for you, but we went through all these things. Okay,
You're going to do a discussion at the end of the meeting that was added on COVID-19. Do you need me for it, or can I watch it at home?
you can watch it at home. Or you can stay, either way you want. I'm not sure how long it's gonna be.
You're going to ease that one, or are you going to restrict it? I'll go home and I'll click onto it and follow the agenda on
Okay,
the internet like everybody else. Well, it's been a pleasure to serve the town, and I appreciate your support. Thank you very much.
and we appreciate you and what you're doing,
Nice to have you in place at times like these.
for sure.
It's easy.
Very comforting.
I'm just a member of a team. It's a whole team.
Yeah.
It's a whole team.
Takes a team, doesn't it?
Don't get me arrested and put in jail because of my driveway now, okay?
That's that guy down there.
Yeah.
He can talk. Thank you.
Okay,
Thanks,
thank
Ken.
you. Okay, item 4, items for discussion, the environmental strategic plan, sustainable by nature, 2020. Curtis, this must be you.
Yeah, so just to bring everyone up to speed, part of our job is to forecast what potential challenges or opportunities might come the town's way. And one of the things that we recognized was there's obviously an increased need, perceptually maybe, or actually in practice, to demonstrate sustainable practices for a municipal organization. A lot of grant funding we're hearing wording from the provincial government, and already we're seeing from the federal government, could be tied to demonstrating that the decisions that you're making and how you're spending your capital dollars are all tied to making your community more sustainable. And so what we felt would be prudent was, as a lot of these grant dollars are competitive, would be to come up with a plan that demonstrates what we've already done. And a lot of these measures we've done admittedly haphazardly, not really as part of a larger plan. Consolidating it all down together in an organized fashion, and also leading out where potential this council or future councils could decide to go to further enhance upon what we've already done. And so this document that's attached is administration's attempt to at least formalize a lot of the content and to give suggestions as to what potential next steps are for council or future councils to take should they choose to. And we hope the intent, outside of being more sustainable and being a bit just more responsible steward of the environment, is to also demonstrate when we do apply for these competitive grant programs that our application is part of a larger vision and it does tie into a larger plan, and capital dollars that are being spent in a coordinated fashion to get the best possible result. And we hope that that'll increase the chances and the competitiveness of our grant applications. So that's the intent of this. We've written the document. We're definitely open to any suggestions, changes, considerations, because this would in fact become council's environmental strategic plan. And so we want to make sure that you are definitely in favor and on board with everything. Just because it's listed in here does not mean you are going to do it. This is just potential next steps that you can do as budget and funding allows. And so if you're comfortable with this, or give us any changes, we'll make those changes. We'll have it made a bit more, put a bit more design work to it to make sure that it matches our current design schemes and just make it a bit more aesthetically pleasing. But outside of that, we'll be bringing it to council for a motion to accept as our environmental sustainability plan, and basically use it as a tool to help guide us in our development going forward.
Well written.
Yes, that was good. You want to go over more of it, or is that just for us to do some?
I can go over as much or as little as you'd like, or if you have any specific questions on parts. It's 18 pages, so I don't want to read it all to you unless you necessarily like me to. But
Does anybody have any specific questions for Curtis?
I had a question. I was kind of waiting for Ron to bring it up.
Go for it, John.
He's the one who always brings it up, but it's at the very beginning, and I'm just looking for it now. I'm on two computers here. It's at the top where it says something about calling Raymond home or something. That was kind of awkward. Go down a little bit, just a minute. Sorry, my other computer went off while I was talking. Here it is, right here. Here it is. You read it, Ron Fromm, because you're the expert. That just doesn't read well to me, where it goes along and then the last thing is call home. I don't know. That read right to me, but maybe I'm wrong. Ron, you edit it. You're the expert.
Actually, I don't mind it. I like it. So.
Okay, good. Okay, we're good then.
No, I think it sounds good.
Put you on the spot.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mayor,
Yes, Councillor Foss, please.
the only comment I had, I like this. I think the direction is good, and I haven't, it's 18 pages. I read as thoroughly as I could, but there was a lot of material to go through tonight. But one thing, whenever we're putting forward a plan like this, a strategic plan or any sort of long-term visioning, my preference would be some level of consultation with the community, even if for this that means we present it as a draft out onto the internet and say, this is a draft proposal, we're seeking feedback from the community to help refine it. That's my only input on the document. Otherwise, I didn't see anything in my reading that was troubling to me, but I do like the idea of getting some input from the community.
yeah, and we can definitely do that if you desire, for sure.
I just am wondering, are you talking about just the TBD parts or the historicity part of it? Some of it are completed. You don't want input on that, I would assume. You're just talking about the parts that are to be determined?
Yeah, and yes, and mostly just sort of to say, like, are we comfortable as a community in moving in this direction? And perhaps folks in the community have ideas to help us to even improve. Like there's other things we haven't thought of that could help us move further in that direction.
Yeah, that's a good suggestion, because we would sure welcome some input from the community if they have any, so yeah.
And to be clear, I'm not suggesting like a long consultation process, just something like some indication in the community that this is a draft that we're considering, and we probably could do that over the next week before we bring it back for approval.
Yeah, there's no rush to have this approved next week. If you'd like to delay that out, you definitely can, so.
So we do want grants, and you says this is there any grants that this needs to be done for, that we need to be using this for getting grants?
I mean, we are putting in numerous grant applications as we speak. I don't know if this necessarily hinders or supports it. We can just reference a plan and we can just say that it's due to be passed. You know, so I don't think that will prevent us.
Having a plan like this is a requirement of any grant process that was specifically applied to the environment or to sustainability. So just merely having the plan is really a one tick box on those applications.
Great. I thought it was very well done. Was there a template that you followed on this, or did you come up with it all by yourselves? Very good job.
We
Yeah,
researched,
I thought it was really good.
we
I loved
researched
it.
a lot of different communities' plans, so we won't take all the credit. But.
Okay. John, when you were talking about like me being picky, the thing I always thought you were going to talk about were the misplaced apostrophes. There are quite a few, but I mean, that's not a big deal.
Oh,
And
okay,
spelling?
okay, there you go.
The spelling
There
is
you go.
quite good.
Yeah.
We can always take grammar corrections offline
Yeah.
anytime.
And I know that is pretty picky, but I thought it was a really good document. I was quite thrilled that I did read every word. So
I did too, only once though. I could go over again. Okay, any other questions on this? So Councillor Foss, you'd like to have him put that out to the community, so try to get some input from them, just on, I guess, on Facebook or the website?
That's my preference. I would say Facebook, because it's reaching out a little more than just putting it on the website. But
I don't think there's any problem with that.
Did you have a timeline you'd like, Councillor Foss?
like I said, I'm comfortable with it coming back to us, next week if there's a window where we could do some, put it out to say this is draft. We're looking for feedback. So, I'm comfortable with it being, like I said, back to us by next week if there's a window for people to get feedback.
Depending on the feedback, we can make the decision to defer the passage of it later anyway, so.
Thank you.
Okay, let's move on to 4.2, bylaw 1087-20. Is Abe, are you there?
He ducked out. He had to go, unfortunately.
What do you want us to do? Do you want us to go back to this one, or you'll talk about it?
Yeah, we can go.
Go ahead, Curtis.
It was brought to our attention that we have a couple of bylaws that are delineating our subdivision authority and our development authority and our municipal planning commission, but we're not necessarily having all of the components that we need to have specified within them. And so what we're recommending is that we're actually going to be creating a new bylaw, bylaw 1087-20, which would be our proposed, it would be the subdivision authority, development authority, municipal planning commission bylaw, which would bring us into legislative compliance completely for all of these different authorities. And we will then bring forward, once we go through this process, a motion to rescind other bylaws that we have that would no longer be relevant. And so this was a recommendation that was brought to our attention when we were in the process of hiring a development officer, and a conversation with Old Man River Regional Services Commission. Our planner mentioned that there was a couple of discrepancies, and so she pulled a bylaw that she felt was well crafted from a neighboring community that we've adjusted to be specific for the town of Raymond, and this is where we're at. So we're just bringing this to you for consideration. It would require 3 readings. There's no urgent need to do this immediately because it is minor legislative adjustments we're making, so there's no real push to do it quickly.
So what would the changes be that she's telling us that we need to do?
I mean, I'd have to review the draft, but one of them specifically was the development officer. The appointment of a development officer is technically something that's supposed to be within this bylaw, but we had it within our land use bylaw. And our land use bylaw is a bylaw of the municipal planning commission and not necessarily a bylaw of council, right? And so it's how that that interface is done there. And so it's just trying to get those nuances in the legislation tied up. I don't know them all off the top of my head, but there was a few.
This just brings us in line with NGA.
Yeah, correct.
There's no sense fighting it, and there's nothing wrong with it, right?
This is strict bureaucracy.
Okay. There's no different changes that we have to be aware of, and that's fine.
There was only one thing that I was concerned about when I started to read like the bylaw that you're suggesting. At one point, it said the municipal planning committee is composed of the 7 of us, plus. And then when we got through, there was an appeal committee that and I was confused a little bit, but I think it's all okay. But we could have a citizen at large, and then we could appoint a council member as an alternate. Then I had to go back and read it again, and I couldn't find, like, I'm thinking of appeals. Can you help me out on that? Or am I confused?
I'll have to review the wording more specifically for those questions, but members of council cannot sit on the appeal board.
Right.
That's been a legislative change that they made with the new Municipal Government Act. And so, because on one hand, you're approving it, and then you're on the appeal board, someone coming to say that your decision was flawed, and you're the person who approved it, right? So it's trying to separate the role.
So the Regional Assessment Review Board, the LARB and the CRB and the RARB, those are not appeal bodies, are they?
They are, but they're assessment review boards.
Okay.
They're not subdivision and development.
Gotcha.
So it's a
Okay.
separate piece of legislation, and it's a separate body altogether.
Okay. It just triggered in my mind when I was going through them that, wait, we're gonna put a council member as an alternate, but it's not for those particular bodies.
Correct.
Okay.
So those ones are strictly for assessment, and you're allowed to have that, provided you have the training, you're allowed to sit on that appeal board, but you're not allowed to sit on one specifically with the municipal planning.
In fact, they want somebody from the community with us.
It's a regional service, so.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, this will come up next week.
Yeah.
So 4.3, bylaw 1090-20, Regional Assessment Review Board.
This is effectively the exact same thing. Just tidying up our bylaws with current provincial legislation to make sure that everything is in line. We're our members of the Chinook Regional Assessment Review Board, which is offered through the Old Man River Regional Services Commission. And so this is just to, the Old Man River Regional Services Commission, they didn't have, their bylaw had some legislative challenges that we had approved previously, and so they're just bringing this back out for us to pass. That is now in compliance.
There's one problem in that one. Are you on? Okay.
Yeah, 920. Are
You
you
on
on the
section-
actual bylaw or on the request or decision?
No, sorry, on the actual bylaw. Wait a minute, I guess.
Yeah, okay.
You're on the bylaw, Ron?
I'm getting ahead of myself.
Which clause, Councilor Crum?
I think it's 12. I might be way ahead of myself. Is this the agreement? No, this isn't the agreement for the Regional Assessment Review Services yet, right?
This is the bylaw that's attached to this, the Regional Assessment Review Board Agreement, the third attachment.
Okay. I could be on the wrong thing, but if you look
I
at
think
it-
it's actually tagged wrong, Ron, on this,
Okay.
looking at this. It might be-
Yeah, the header, the footer of that bylaw has 1086-20, and it should be 1090-20, so we will
Gotcha.
make that adjustment.
Okay.
Do you have questions on this?
I do, and I can't, I just, give me 1 second to find out where my question is, okay.
So while you're looking, Mark, do we need a change in the bylaw for when you have a property, you're notifying all the properties around to make that a bigger area to notify more people around that property that we're looking at? For example, a development on a property and then they've contacted a few, can we make that a bigger area to contact more people?
Yeah, we could. There's definitely stuff in the land use bylaw currently that kind of has some guidelines on who to notify. And there is a section in the land use bylaw where it is strictly outlines who to notify based on the development application. So,
So we can expand that area, do we need to come back?
we
Change
could.
that by law?
I don't think so. I think that the land use bylaw is well written in that regards, is that there's no strict limits, and we can look exactly on how that's written, but one thing I think that is in there right now is that sometimes it's at the discretion of the development authority to put notification. So if the development officer thinks that a person may be affected, it's our obligation to let them know. So so there's no strict guidelines, correct me if I'm wrong.
So it depends on the nature of the project. You also have to consider weighing in on this. So if you expand your radius to, say, a square block versus immediate and adjacent landowners, you're giving people within that square block more or less the same sort of discussion weight as you would the people who are most affected, right? So there is some general balances on this. Our guidelines through the land use bylaw are strictly adhered to from the MGA, as Mark has indicated. So you just have to be a little bit careful in the sense that you open up an imbalance between really who you really need to hear from and who might just have a comment or two or something.
One comment that was brought to me, like one of the projects that was being made and people came here and appealed to it, it was only sent out to each side of that proposed building and then across the street.
Yeah.
And they just wanted to know why it didn't go down the street, just a couple of my homes.
Again, that's,
Because they're affected too.
but not as much as those people that are immediately adjacent, right? So, So you
Their-
have-
Their concern was they were affected.
That's a perceived effect.
yeah,
It's
Yeah.
perceived in
It's
that
perceived.
sense. And so the land use bylaw basically states if you remove the road, it's just the adjacent boundaries, because those are the properties that are directly affected by development. That's who you're supposed to notify. Council can expand that, but I think it's been well stated, you open up the opportunity for people who have a perceptual grievance which may be valid in their mind, may not have the same weight as one who's directly affected because they are directly beside it, whether it's for or against, and you're giving that equal weight. And so I think council or the municipal planning commission just needs to be very careful as to how much they're wanting to open that up, because you also have a responsibility to give the person who's presenting a proposal an equal and fair opportunity that's unbiased from factors that are outside of what would be considered an appropriate area. And so that's just for you guys to decide, but
So when it comes to us, it's almost too late because you've already notified those people.
based on the land use bylaw.
Yeah, and then there's other people that are coming they want to come and state their issues with it too, and they had to find out from their neighbor instead of having been notified.
Which
That's what their complaint is, they'd just like to be notified too.
yeah, and the question is how far do you go and what is appropriate? And that's up to you to decide, but it's a delicate balance of whether or not you're opening it up too much for conversation to people that really don't have a valid stake in it, as do others that are more closely affected to it.
So I guess we could have that brought to us sometime to see who
Yep.
we think is more, have something at stake, should have some opinion,
Yeah, as a council, you can make those determinations for sure.
we can bring that forward sometime. I guess at an MPC, we can talk about it.
I think so, yeah, that would be a great starting point. Great.
Any other questions from anybody? Okay, we'll go back to Councillor Front. Did you find what you're looking
Yeah,
at?
and it's not in the bylaw, the bylaw is great, but the agreement that's attached to it has got one little niggly thing in it, in the insurance clause 11.1. And this is a draft, but who drafted this? Is this us?
Land River.
Oh, okay. The clerk through will arrange for comprehensive general liability. Something's missing there, and I don't know if it's a big thing or a small thing, because you can't really tell. The clerk through a certain company, or the clerk through whatever. And I
We
guess
will
that just
inquire.
had to be brought to their attention.
Yep, we will definitely inquire.
11.1 there.
Yeah. I just didn't know if they have to go through a certain company or through a provincial body or whatever.
Okay.
But there's something in it missing. And that's it for me.
That's it for you. Anyone else have any questions?
Just, they're having a hard time hearing you, so just hold on. Yeah, I don't know what's going on with Word
When that happened to me, I just logged out and logged back in, and then it came.
Okay.
For the first 5 minutes, I had no sound, and then I logged out and came back in, and it was there. So maybe you have to do that. I don't know. That's what I did. That worked.
Okay. Any other questions then? Can you all hear me?
No, Ralph's not hearing it yet.
Ralph's not hearing? Or Councillor Price is not hearing?
Price is good.
Councillor Peters is good?
I can hear again now, but I had to log out and log back in.
Councillor Price?
He'll drop off here.
Greg just sent a message to that effect, so I'm gonna log out and log back in.
We can hear you. Okay. Okay, should we move on then? We gotta wait to see if they have any discussion. Any more questions from any of you then? This is always a little bit frustrating as we try to get this all worked out, as we live stream like this with you, not here. Councillor Price, can you hear us now? Are we ready to move on? Anybody have any questions? You can give me a hand signal. Okay, we got 1 thumbs up, 2 thumbs up, 3 thumbs up. Okay, we got Councillor Price. Okay, let's move on. So we are now to the 4.4, 11-2020 RFP proposed Sugar City Municipal Development Corporation. Okay, who's talking on this one?
I'll be speaking. So, in 2018, the Municipal Government Act was modernized, and it reduced the difficulty of municipalities from forming and setting municipally controlled corporations, and it streamlined the process to provide a bit more flexibility. And at the time, we recommended an opportunity, and council felt that there was a benefit to the community, and so we've been working through the process to have the Sugar City Municipal Development Corporation formalized. It's been registered as a corporation. There's just some other legislative requirements that we have to fulfill, and one of those is we need to establish a public hearing. And at that public hearing, 30 days beforehand, we have to have advertised the business plan and the 5-year proposed operating budget for the Development Corp. We've gone through the legislative requirements, and we do feel that everything within the business plan that's presented meets those legislative requirements. We spoke with representatives from Municipal Affairs, and they are comfortable with what we've presented. And so we're just looking to bring this to council, that if you are still in favor of proceeding down this path, that you do set a date for this proposed public hearing. We've identified Tuesday, June 9th, which gives more than 30 days for us to be able to advertise that out, so that there's ample opportunities for people to review and provide opportunities for comments or feedback at that time. In this process, we did meet extensively with our local developers to explain the rationale as to why this is a benefit we feel to the town of Raymond, and how we feel it will not only benefit them individually as they're able to partner with the Development Corp as it's able to get up and running, but how it will benefit the town organization as a whole. And so we're bringing this to you for any input or direction, or if you're comfortable that we would direct us to bring it to our upcoming council meeting to establish the date of Tuesday, June 9th as the public hearing, or another date if you choose.
Okay, what's the discussion, the feelings on this? Anybody want to comment? I think June 9th is a lot of time. It gives the public more time to have some discussion on it, maybe some can be out there on Facebook again. Anybody else?
I think it's still important. I mean.
Ken, is it legal to do the public hearing, just, virtually? Is there any problem with that, Curtis?
No, they've relaxed legislation restrictions a bit, where
Okay.
there's an opportunity there, but the goal would be that hopefully by then there may be an opportunity for some gathering. I mean, technically, we could allow up to 15 people here, provided that there's social distancing, so it could be held at a different venue where we could ensure that there's spacing opportunities for those if we do get a large group of people wanting to, but I do believe that they have expanded the opportunities there so that it can be held virtually.
So you could put that out there though, when you notice people, it could be if there's a lot of interest, let us know. We could hold it at somewhere else, like, for example, at the theater.
Yep.
Okay. I think that'd be a good idea. Anybody else have any ideas on this? Councillor Foss?
Yeah, just a couple of picky notes and questions. There's a list of properties to be transferred to this corporation. And I think generally I'm comfortable with them, but there's a couple on there that I thought perhaps that we hesitate to transfer properties that have a potential to be future municipal use, like parks or public spaces. So the ones I highlighted, there's 2 lots on block 55, which is in the extreme northwest of Raymond, about 2 blocks down from the current where the Dairy Queen is proposed to go. And then the other one is on that list, lot 1, block 3, which is the old Ridgeview Lodge location. And I think we had discussed doing some sort of consultation or making further decisions about how to use that property, and potentially it ends up being developed, but I think it might be premature to transfer that property to this corporation.
So just a comment on that, and that's perfectly fine. You also note that the zoning would have to be changed anyways on that particular piece. So really, at the end of the day, there'd be a lot of a need to come back to rezone that and go to public hearing on that specific property. If it's already zoned residential, I don't know that there'd be much issues with council on any sort of development changes on that because it already meets the zoning requirements. But particular on that property, I think we're gonna have to really make sure that that fits the vision and goal of what council wants with that property regardless, so.
Yeah, so I'm not saying never, I'm just saying
Yeah.
perhaps not right up front until we know more about. I would suggest both, or there's 3 properties that I've sort of highlighted, the 2 on block 55, the Ridgeview Lodge location. Just because I don't think it's in the mandate of this, although this corporation might be involved in park building and development, I don't think generally their business is building parks or public spaces. That's the business of the town of Raymond. And so if we have a potential for that and haven't quite decided what we want to be developed, I would hesitate to transfer that property.
But Stuart, I was thinking while you were saying that, couldn't it be possible to have that consultation after transfer of title? Because I mean, growth and sustainable development and balance and enhancing assessment base and stuff, I mean, that all is stuff that we could still influence the Sugar City Development Corporation with consultation.
I hesitate to transfer it if the end result will be transferring it back. I'd say, why don't we just hang on to the 3 properties, which I think are valued at about $150,000. Let them have the rest if those are all ready for development, but the ones that we might not be quite ready to develop, that's my only take, is that we hesitate, defer that until a future date to transfer.
I'm just saying that there's not a problem with transferring title to the development corporation and then still making a park out of some of those places. Do you think that one, do you think that
I just have a
includes
question.
the
Go ahead,
ability
Ron,
to-
on your last.
Go ahead, Councillor Harker.
I just have a question. So, Greg, is there a problem if we don't do this all at once? Can you add things as you go? Or do you have to do it at the outset?
No, you can.
Does that create a problem at all?
No, not at all. You can, it probably would cost us a little more because when you're doing more things at one time, it generally tends to be a little cheaper for us to manage the end of moving the titles. But again, you also have members of council sitting on the board of Sugar City, so ultimately they're going to get the marching orders from council either way. It really doesn't matter in my view which way you go on that.
I just see it as one
So-
of the four themes is working cooperatively with economic and community development stakeholders. Whether the title remains with the town or with the development corporation, that consultation could still take place and the land use could be decided either way. So I guess what I'm saying is not a big issue because you could either not transfer the title or you could, and you could still go through the same community consultation.
Councillor Foss?
So maybe just to clarify for me, my assumption is that this corporation is not going to be building parks for us. Is that a correct assumption?
Depending on the development that's proposed, one of the objectives would be that it would potentially put in the green space first for development that is developed to a finished standard, and then properties are being sold when the streets are paved, the boulevards are developed, and the playground's actually already put in. So that is one of the intents of the development corporation. We do have some developments that have happened historically where land has been set aside for a playground or a park, but in a future phase, but that phase has never occurred. And so development has occurred, but we don't actually have the promised green space to accompany it, just due to financial limitations or challenges that the developer may have faced, or other extenuating circumstances.
My view is that that situation doesn't apply to these properties because I don't know that any of them are large enough blocks for a subdivision, like a large development. And I think as Sugar City Corporation grows and takes on larger blocks, then yeah, I think park buildings may be in the mandate. But I think for these individual lots, I just hesitate to transfer some lots that we may say, you know what, actually we haven't quite decided how we want to use that. We might want to use that as a park. Why transfer it and then potentially have to try and get it transferred back? Just seems like an extra level of complexity that's unnecessary.
Yeah, no, very valid.
I believe I'm siding with you on this, Councillor Foss. I think that's, you got a good point.
Comment?
Councillor Price?
In listening to the discussion, I also probably would lean somewhat to the side of not including them at this particular point in time. My major question is, if we don't, do we have to redraft budget plans? Do we have to redraft a bunch of the other documentation? And at what expense would that be to accommodate all of that and just drop those three properties from our listing?
No, there'd be no additional challenges in that sense or costs. This is strict. I mean, the majority of this is going to be the ideal goal is that we're using this as land that's being transferred to the development corporation, which they can use to leverage either debenture opportunities for them to finance the capital infrastructure, or it's an ability for them to have some cash flow or some assets that they can use to help facilitate that. The preferable solution is that 1 year council actually allocates some capital grant money to get the development corp up and running without having to incur a debt, so that any profits that come from the proceeds of the sale of the subdivided capital projects is actually going to perpetuate further growth and not paying back past debt. And so this is strictly just giving us assets to leverage if you need to debenture, whether or not we have to pull three properties off of this Word document that we're approving right now. Won't have any challenges. This is just to get it going, demonstrating that the corporation has assets from the beginning with which to work from.
Like I say, then I don't have a problem with them staying, but I think there is some potential benefit to allowing us to make a decision at council level as to the use of those properties before we transfer them into the corporation.
I guess the only downside would be is if they were used as collateral to finance development projects, that just reduces the collateral available to the development corporation. I don't see it as a big deal.
The amount right now is what, $750,000? Is that what those lots were worth?
Those 3 lots?
No, the total of the lots to transfer was at 750 or a little more than that.
1.2 million.
1.2 million.
One point two, so 150,000. I don't think it hurts us significantly. I'm neutral. I would go either way, but I do
So am I.
understand
I'm neutral.
Councillor Foss's concerns on making, some decisions at council level before they were transferred.
So are any of these lots, are they infill, or is this all,
Oh, it's all infill lots.
It's all infill lots.
they're all infill lots?
Yeah.
Some are larger parcels than others, but they are all within existing developed areas.
Okay, any other questions on this from anybody? Okay, so we've got some direction to go for next week, when we have a council meeting. Okay, if not, we'll move on. 4.5, the budget for 2020 and the tax rate bylaw. So this is discussion on the operating budget and the tax rate bylaw. So Marty, are you there on this one?
I'm here.
Okay. So, Curtis, I guess we'll let you, start this one too, please.
A few weeks ago, we set a timeline, council approved, to basically lay out how we're going to pass the 2020 operating budget and approve the 2020 tax rate bylaw. Part of that was establishing the date of May 5th as the decision date to determine whether or not the pool is opening this year, Heritage Days, and the implications that would have on the budget. And so what we're looking for right now, we said, is we bring it back to committee the week before May 5th to see what your thoughts and feelings were, if anything's dramatically changed. And then to give us that direction, this budget that's proposed here has the expenses of operating all our facilities, the revenues and the expenses built into the budget. So that if changes were to happen later on in the year, we still have the ability to operate. And so that's just what we're looking for some direction. So I will stop and I'll actually let you discuss. And if you do have questions, I'll allow our Chief Financial Officer, Mark Wolf, answer any questions you may have, because he's very well versed in this matter.
Okay. Marty, do you want to go through this with us, or do you want Councillor Price as our chair of our audit committee to start on this, or how would you like to do this?
I really don't know where to start. We haven't changed anything because there's still so much that we don't know is going to happen, and therefore we just left the tax rate bylaw the way that we had initially discussed, with a bit of an increase to the mill rate for municipal purposes. It's been lowered a little bit for education purposes, but there is still an increase from last year in our education rate because our equalized assessment has gone up so significantly. And we've also adjusted for a little bit of an increase in minimum tax for non-improved properties and for modular homes, like trailer parks and stuff like that. So because of the increase to everybody else, we increased those two minimum tax amounts to make it fair for everybody.
And so the one other thing that we will still say, though, is prior to the provincial government increasing the education requisition, reducing our MSI operating grant because of our increased equalization or equalized assessment, and the enhanced policing costs, council had a balanced budget. These increases are strictly because of provincial download expenses that are beyond our ability to absorb, as we don't have space to do so further. And so
That's right.
that's where we're looking for your direction, based on our conversations before. If you'd like to proceed with this plan going forward, as you previously discussed, or if there's changes you'd like to make as of now going forward.
So the tax rate's going from what, up to 8.2?
7.575 to 8.2, which I believe is 8 to 9% of an increase.
Roughly a half mill rate.
Yeah, 8.2%.
Now that'll be dependent upon everyone's own individual assessments. Some will be more, some will be less, but it's in that ballpark.
Well, in the past 6 years, I think we've only raised taxes once, and it was, wasn't much, it was less than that, I think.
In 2012, you raised, the last time you raised it before 2017 was 2012, I believe. And when you raised it in 18, it was up 1%.
1%, and this is a 0.5%.
It was a very minor increase at that particular time. It goes back to the philosophy that many people have when it talks about the tax base and the tax rate that we're using, that it's better to implement a tiny bit at a time each year rather than a huge jump like we're having to do at this particular time. And, in some ways I feel that that's hurt us a little bit based on our past decisions, but
What's hurt us, sorry to interrupt, Ralph, but what's hurt us more is the loss of our MSI operating
yes.
money that we got. That's the biggest kick. And so, because our equalized assessment went up to be 40%, above 40%, we lose almost half of our MSI operating money.
Which was how
And
much?
that's what's really killing
165,000
us.
we lost.
How much?
165,000.
That's what we lost.
Yes.
Yes, we lost that much.
We lost 165 in MSI capital, or MSI operating. We are now paying for our policing service, which is a $55,000 hit as well. So just between those two things, we're up $220,000 from last year in our costs.
The outside influences are significant this year, there's no question of that.
So like Curtis was just saying, the downloading from the province is making us have to do this, plus the loss of the MSI operating.
I got a question.
Councillor Peters, sorry.
So if we're at 8.2 this year and we know that our policing is going to go up next year, do we have any indication that over the next 2 to 3 years MSI will keep going down? Are we gonna have to tell our members in the community that we're going to be increasing the next probably 2 years, increasing the mill rate?
Right now, it's hard to say exactly how that's going to forecast out. MSI operating is based on a 4-tier system. If you are under 40% of the provincial average for equalization, you get the full grant amount, and that's what we had historically. This year, because of the growth that Raymond's seen over the last 10 years, as we've documented, our equalized assessment has strengthened compared to the provinces, and now we are over that 40%. So once you get between over 50%, but less than 60, it gets cut in half roughly again, and once you're over 60, it gets cut to nothing. So before
But we're barely over 40.
Yeah, we're 40.5% right now, or 40.9%.
We won't get a hit from MSI operating unless the province totally eliminates MSI operating in the next couple of years.
Yeah, and
which could happen.
There is a potential that may happen, but we don't know yet. So we have some unknowns in our budget that we're trying to work through, and that we're hoping we can absorb future increases. But yes, Councillor Price, that may be a possibility. We do not know that yet for sure.
So that comparison chart that someone speaking? No?
I have a question.
Councillor Harker, go ahead.
I'm just looking at the Community Services Administration, which went from 533 to this year at 663. Is that just, I'm trying to figure that out because I know we have less administration than we did last year. So can you tell me that, Marty, what that is about?
Okay, you got it, which one?
Community Services Administration,
So
that line that is 663, 154, a 27% increase.
So
Administration, Community Services Administration.
So Councillor Harker, one of the main reasons that's changed is we accounted for our wages differently than we had in previous years. So that's, we had more of a, what's the word? Our part-time staff and our full-time staff were consolidated together in various ways. And this way we were pulling things out so that full-time staff is under administration and seasonal staff are under the other areas there. So we are accounting for the wages differently. The overall total is less than what it was. But mind you, there is an increase in wages that happened due to union collective agreement. So that did take effect as well. But the overall reduction has been there. It's just accounted for differently. Am I correct?
Okay, I knew there was an explanation. I just didn't know what it was.
It's just an allocation.
$300,000 less than last
Yeah.
year.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Marty, did you have a comment there?
I just said that if you look at the community services as a whole, we went from 1.5 million last year to 1.4 million budgeted for this year. So it's actually less than what we're actually spending, what we actually spent last year, so.
Thank you. Good to know.
In fact, that was just your budget for last year. From your actuals, it's 1.7 down to 1.4.
So that one
Yeah, exactly.
graph or chart, Curtis, that you bring up sometimes that shows other communities, is there a possibility you can bring that up right now, or is that something you can bring up next week?
It would be easier for us to bring up next week. The challenge with that, though, is we don't know the impact that everyone's 2020 mill rates are going to be. So it's hard to compare.
But I'd still like to see it.
Yeah.
Because I still have people tell me that we're way higher than other communities. And
We out of 46 municipalities that we track south of Calgary, or including Calgary South, we were 26th out of 48 in overall combined mill rate and utility taxes and utility expenses. So we were right smack dab in the middle.
So I'd like you to bring that up for next
Correct.
week.
Yeah, we can.
And we can,
Now that'll be 2019 numbers. It won't reflect 2020.
for sure.
Okay.
I understand. Okay. Anybody else have any comments on this?
Just maybe a final interjection. I've said it before and I'll say it again. Planning for a balanced budget is still the proper procedure in a business organization. We don't know the status of what deficits will be this year. If the government does not change their position on deficits, then we have to absorb whatever deficit we have this year into next year's budget anyway. So we need to give ourselves every opportunity to get a balanced budget and stick to that balanced budget to the best of our ability.
And in just piggybacking on that comment, if we're somehow able to save a lot more money than we were hoping to, we could always take and set aside a certain amount for a reserve and reduce our expenses next year based on the profits that we are able to generate in 2020,
That's correct.
which will help us in the future.
Any other questions or comments from anybody? Okay. Let's move on then. We'll move on to 4.6, the rural hospital funding model changes. You see the shared notes. See Curtis's notes there.
So during last week's council meeting, Councillor Foss brought up a conversation that he had with some of our local doctor. at some of the frustrations and challenges they were facing with Alberta Health Services and their negotiations with the doctors in the province. Council directed us to write a letter and for me to reach out to speak with some of the doctors. I did reach out to speak with one, and I had put a phone call into another. But when I was in the process of preparing the release, Councillor Foss emailed at the same time that I had noticed that the province had actually rescinded that order. And so I'm just looking for direction from council if you still want me to send a letter, or if you're just wanting to let the province and the Medical Association of Alberta work things out on their own.
Mayor, may I add some more context?
Yep, Councillor Foss, please.
So when that initial reversal came out on Friday, it included a revised list of communities that were eligible for this rural program, and 141 were removed from the previous list. And Raymond, Sterling, Welling, those were all dropped from the rural program in the initial release. Now, Sunday they again reversed and added those communities that had been dropped, Raymond included, back into the list, which is a relief. But although I'm not sure that it makes sense to write the letter that we'd originally envisioned writing anymore. I think there would be some value in getting some clarification from our MLA, Minister Hunter, and just to ensure, because there is some discomfort for me in the fact that Raymond was dropped from this rural list, and I think primarily due to our proximity to Lethbridge. I think we should try to seek some assurances that we are in fact in that rural program, and that he's advocating for rural medicine out here in Raymond.
Yeah, no,
That's my take.
I concur with that, because when I saw that too, I was a little bit disturbed by it too.
I did talk to Grant on Saturday, and he acted like, I mean, it was before I had actually looked at it before, and I don't know if the leaving Raymond off the list, do you think that was an oversight or was that a readjustment? I don't really know, but he acted like our town would be very happy with what they did. So I don't know if it was an oversight or if they readjusted it, but he acted like they'd done something fabulous, so.
Yeah, they did describe it as an error, a mistake. It was not intentional.
Okay, I wonder.
But I think the list of 140 that were dropped were all communities, like the program, the RRNP, evaluates, I think, 7 criteria to determine whether you're eligible. And all the ones that were dropped were the ones that had the closest proximity to a major center. So that's why I assume they were dropped. They described it as an error. I don't know more than that, but it did make me a little unsettled. Why was they had changed something in the formula that resulted in this dropping, and I guess I'm just hoping we can get some assurance from our MLA that he is advocating that we're included in that list going forward.
I like your idea. I think we should reach out and talk to Grant Hunter or send him a letter and see if he'll give us a response back. Everybody okay with that? I'm seeing some nods. This is a little harder to do this when everybody's not present,
Yeah.
but I think there's some thumbs coming up, okay? Okay, let's do that. If our administration will do that for next week, and we can review that and hopefully send that away. Okay. 4.7, the Tourism and Economic Development Committee proposal,
Okay, I'll try to run all of this at the same time and speak. I just want to pull this up here. I'm going to compress a little bit of the agenda. I added this afternoon to the agenda just to give you a bit more of an expanded view of some things that I'd like you to consider. I've been meeting with many of our business owners during this pandemic, and there's some challenges and feelings. I'm just going to flip this over here so you guys can see it. Does that work? Maybe, maybe not. Okay, let me just do this. Sorry, I'm not sure if this will work this way or not. Okay. During issues of crisis, when businesses are forced to be closed, there's some statistical data that supports that only 1 in 4 of those may never reopen. And what I've asked, and I've gone around to our businesses, asking them how are they feeling about things, what's their issues. Many of them are seeing, outside of a few of our grocery stores and pharmacies, they're seeing more than 50% reduction in sales. So they're really questioning some long-term guarantees for them. So what we've been doing, or I've been doing, is working with. I've been invited to be part of a regional task force that is helping to pull information in and connect with all businesses to help them and inform them in what funding is available, to get direct information from them as to what is not working, if the funding is simply something not they can have access to. Partnering with the chamber, again with COVID-19, it makes holding meetings a bit of a challenge. But also talking about what can we do as a municipality in helping our business succeed. So it's a little hard to read some of this data, and I'm happy to provide. This is a survey that went out into the whole region, and I actually sent out the survey specifically to Raymond, and the numbers were pretty much fairly consistent. Most have lost or let go of staff or reduced hours by 50%. 78% of businesses, that's significant, have seen a reduction in sales. There's lots of things that we need to consider. And I want to preface the next few slides on one very important statement, and that is, if our community of Raymond loses a business, we lose the viability and sustainability to our community. We have a very small business sector in town, very small. And as such, when we lose one, it just compounds that problem even more. So it's really critical that we try to hold on to our businesses the best way that we can. So I'm going to throw back this proposal. I've talked to you about it before. It's been part of the radar for council many times. We are not a visitor-friendly community. And really for our businesses, and I want to stress this point, and for our businesses to succeed, they must branch out and market themselves beyond the Raymond town borders. And if they do that, they will invite people to our community, but those people in our community essentially will be lost because there's no real way to navigate our community. So we need to set them up for success. We've looked at this before. These are just examples. It's certainly by no means what we would do. I would suggest that the Tourism and Economic Development Committee could come up with a design and save us some money there. And again, what we could do is inject money into our local economy by hiring and purchasing the material from our businesses. Okay, so again, this is something where it fills a need, but also it fills a big need for some of our businesses in town.
Greg, are you sharing the screen, or do you want us to look on our own devices? I mean, I have mine, but I thought you were going to try and share it. You're not?
Well, it's coming up on my screen, Joan, online.
Can everybody else see it?
You can click on the screen share, I believe, on your view.
Oh,
it's coming
okay.
up. It's coming up here.
Try that. Share. Anybody else? Yeah. Oh.
It is in the agenda, and I apologize.
No, it's okay. I've got two computers, but I just thought maybe you
Okay.
were sharing it and I was missing it. That's fine.
Okay. My apologies. So again, talking about parklets, these are ways to expand business from inside our buildings to outside. And in a lot of cases with COVID, that might be a very good thing. We've looked at a couple of locations. One kind of piggybacking basically the crosswalk areas. That way we would not incur a loss of parking, or at least it would be minimized if there is a loss with some of our businesses. This really encourages more shopping, more time spending, visiting, and eating in our community. I do not want to do the same thing that the city of Lethbridge has done with some of their spots, where they've done things with wooden pallets and things. I think we need to make sure that what we are creating really sets an expectation and a tone of what we set as a standard for what we want for our businesses. We haven't got pure designs yet for this, but I'm leaning on this as a recommendation, mostly because it really fits our angled parking. But you could go with something more rectangular like those. So I'm asking, or I'll flip to that page last year. This is,
which one are you looking at?
so I'm now at page 13.
Anybody else?
Page 13, Joan.
So where are you
13 on the.
I'm just going to 13 now.
Where are you thinking about putting these?
So they would be where the crosswalks go, because we've got quite a bit of paint that already takes up parking by those crosswalks. And then some of them, they're a little bit lopsided. We actually have the one that's in front of our Chinese restaurant. It actually covers more on one side, the painting, the yellow lines, than it does on one of the other sides. And that's partially because of the angle. We couldn't fit them in on the yellow lines. Because they're not allowed to park there anyways, so there would not be a loss to our businesses.
It's the natural setback from the crosswalks.
Yeah.
So it's just utilizing that space where cars can't park, because if they were to back up, they'd back up into the crosswalk.
I think I'd have to have a better vision of what you're trying to make. I don't understand this.
So where,
So
basically
you're
just
trying to have
pictures.
these big billboard signs right there?
Not billboards,
Is it-
no, this is a parklet.
The parklets.
Oh, the parklets.
Yeah, back to the
I thought you were
parklets.
back on 3.
No, so on
I'm
10,
really confused. Is anybody else really confused?
I thought you were
I'm
talking
not.
about
Put
the
in the
advertising.
parklets.
well, I was just going to it.
I thought they were talking about the advertising opportunity.
No.
No.
Well,
That's
it-
next.
The page 13 says outdoor advertising.
Yes, so that's where I'm going, but if you go back to 10, this is,
Okay, I'll go
we
back.
haven't talked about the advertising just
I
yet.
was confused too, Councillor Eckers.
What's on the TVs here, you're able to follow along right here in council chambers. So these would go by the crosswalks that have kind of that angled yellow paint, where there's a restriction on parking right now already. Whether that's big enough or not, I don't know. And they would be removed in winter, so that which seems to be 9 months of the year apparently. We would take these out so that we could still, continue to snow plow Main Street. Okay?
Okay.
So that's the parklets. Now, if you go to 13, we're going to talk about advertising opportunity. This has just come into my email this week. I've on page 13, if you're following at home, this is actually a visual of the sign itself. There's a few of them in Lethbridge. I'm sure many of you have seen them along Mammograth and other areas. They are looking to recycle these and refresh these models with newer versions in Lethbridge. And so this agency has contacted me to see if we would have any interest in picking one of these up. They cost originally about $125,000. We do have the opportunity to purchase them. There's 2 available for $15,000 each. Now that's just for the panel itself. We would have to build a stand similar to what's there and put it in the concrete, that sort of thing. The estimated cost for that actually is about $15,000. That's if we farm it out entirely. We could probably reduce that a little bit if we did some of the work ourselves.
So this is where I was asking, where do you have a vision of placing these?
I have a few ideas. We could do them on, what we're trying to do is consider the suggestions from Roger Brooks, and that is to become visitor friendly, We want to encourage people that are visiting Raymond to come through Highway 52, right? Not from 845. So what I'd recommend is you could have two options. One would be to replace. Now these are a little bit bigger, so I'm not quite sure the one at the west part of town would be the right spot because of the size. We need to look at other options there, but to replace the community signs on Highway 52. So we would take those community boards out. They wouldn't be necessary as they could still use the electronic signage for their events if we put them in that place. The challenge that we have with the structures right now is when some groups get in there, they put a sign up a couple of months in advance of their event. It prohibits anybody else from putting another sign up. There's no sharing of that space, and we are becoming more event intensive in Raymond, which is great. But they're finding it a bit of a challenge to advertise, particularly in that vein. Your other option that I would like to explore would be to move to keep one on the east side of town, kind of where the sign is now, but move this right actually at the T intersection on Highway 5 by Welling. So you would pull off that traffic that's going to Waterton. You'd be pulling off people to McGrath and keeping people engaged and informed on what's happening in Raymond from that direction. It also provides probably a better revenue opportunity for ad sales, given the fact that you have all that traffic going down Highway 5 versus strictly just what's coming through Raymond. So I have reached out to the ad agency to talk about revenue opportunities. He's given me numbers that are today. Obviously, even say 3 months ago, they were significantly higher. So post-COVID, this would probably change dramatically. These would likely pay for themselves within just a couple of years.
Greg, a question.
Yeah.
Who's managing the ad inventory? Is the ad agency handling that, or we would be handling it internally?
My preference would be for us to manage it because we lose revenue when we ask someone else to manage that for us.
What kind of interest do you think you'd have from our business owners? Like,
hard to
it's
say.
gonna cost money for them to do this.
Sure would, yeah. They generally, again, we're dealing with Lethbridge, which is a bit of a different market. Now there is, we have more expanded businesses coming, particularly with restaurants, that sort of thing. A lot of businesses would find this a very good opportunity. Our community groups, certainly we could come up with either, a no fee or a very reduced fee. It's entirely upon what council sees as a direction. Right now, they charge, in COVID, they've been charging $600 a month for an ad that basically flips every 8 seconds. So there's still very good opportunities to make money. With this ad agency, we can actually invite national advertising from outside Raymond sources as well. So it wouldn't be restricted. We wouldn't have our revenue flow only be from Raymond businesses. We could certainly look at other opportunities. It also gives us opportunity to very powerfully send a message of what's happening with the town, whether it's events, whether it's public hearing notifications, what have you. It's a very, very visual, whereas a lot of things get lost right now. So based on the revenue numbers that he's provided me, within 2 years, they'd be paid for.
Someone has a comment? I can't, you're not up on the screen.
Sorry, that's me.
Councilor Foss?
Yeah, sorry, it just dawned on me, maybe a little late. These are digital panels.
Digital,
like they're not
HD,
traditional billboard.
That just dawned on me too, actually. Because, Greg, you said that it would only serve one customer at a time, and that's why I was confused.
That's the current model, yes. So
But if it's digital and it changes every 10 seconds.
no, the
can't you
current
have
model
more?
is in what boards we have in place now at our entry points, John.
The 4x8 sheets of plywood.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it there until they, okay. My question is that it's $15,000 to purchase, then an additional $15,000 to mount and install?
Yeah, and we don't have to we don't necessarily have to install them this year. The challenge is there's a a couple of neighboring communities, unfortunately, have also been put in on this process. So we are unfortunately a bit of a competition standpoint. I'd probably recommend that if we're going to decide to do that, if we can budget obviously the installation cost, then that would be my preference. However, we could store this for this year, pick up the panel this year, and then certainly get it going next year. It's $30,000 essentially per sign.
Do you think there'd be any appetite to share one with McGrath if you put it right there at the
Easily.
intersection?
Yeah.
Because I mean, there's a lot of Raymond traffic that would,
Yeah.
benefit McGrath or Carson
Yeah, it'll
to know what's going on further west.
And I think the opportunity that's here is that it does give us almost the opportunity to have kind of a split rate, a local rate. But realistically, if you want to have some of these national agencies that want to get the advertising on that Highway 5 corridor, or even against Roger Brooks' recommendations, Highway 4, which probably has more traffic, you could probably bankroll and fund, get a lot of your revenue off of those, but still have opportunities for local groups to get in on it and have the advertising, but we're not requiring them to pay the bill necessarily. You know, it's
Warren Trail has a little money in the bank.
Yeah, they do. So is it solar, or
That's-
is it power? I'm
It's
not
power.
following this. Talked about having it out on highway,
Yeah,
does it need power?
yeah, it needs power and internet, yeah.
Okay,
What
how
is
does that
the,
work?
what is the cost to run these?
In terms of electricity,
Yeah, electricity and stuff.
I don't have, again, because this came in very fresh, I don't have the data, but, I mean,
Yeah, I was just looking at all the numbers, I just didn't see one for the cost.
we would still include that under our solar program anyways, because it's it'd be a metered connection, right? So.
Okay.
So that's the advertising opportunity. Again, timing is a bit of a.
Yeah, the timing is not good.
Timing is not good. Just going to flip here.
Yeah. In our budget discussions, we've talked about the wayfinding signage, and we talked about the parklets, and I think we had to put both off this year.
Well, you do have some unallocated funds that you're gonna have to make some decisions with. So you'll have an opportunity, I think, to see if you can entertain these or not. This also has come to mind too. Well, I saw this one out. Neighboring community outside of Calgary has run an outdoor movie event. So this is a old school drive-in movie during COVID. I think there's a lot of families that are very anxious and desiring to look for an opportunity to do something. I believe this would be extremely popular. I have sourced at least one location. I'm still looking at other options because I do believe we would have a very large turnout for this in Raymond. I really do. Cost for this one-time event is about $4,000.
One-time event?
Yeah.
Once you set it all up, you're not,
They take it out,
They take them.
they set it up, they take it down
Gone
right
2 hours later.
It's gone over very, very well. I forget where it was.
Redcliffe did it.
Redcliffe, thank you.
Well, that might be our 1st of July event, who knows?
Well, so on that note, Joan, you're right. It could be. However, I would not recommend you wait that late because the challenges of time. It's sunnier every day that goes by. It gets a little sunnier at night. So I would like to do this in May. In fact, I'd like to do this in the middle of May. Maybe as late as May long weekend, but it's getting sunnier later every day. So, I don't want to start the movie at midnight.
what are you charging for the people to come in their car?
So that's entirely upon you. We could charge, like we are charging at the theater now, to help recover some of this cost. Again, based on popularity, we have been charging $3 a head at the community center.
That's been a big success. There's a lot of people.
Oh, for sure, huge
I'm really
success.
thrilled with that.
Now, under COVID rules, we wouldn't be able to have a concession or anything like that. Everyone would be restricted to their vehicles. unfortunately, but with Redcliffe, it went over very, very well.
Instead of per head, could you maybe go with charge per car, like $10 a car?
My only concern with that is it might encourage people to put people in their car that are not family members, and I don't want AHS or anyone else to sort of come down where we're encouraging, nefarious behavior.
Wouldn't
Yeah.
really be old school though if you couldn't put somebody in the trunk. You know?
Yeah, exactly, right? Yeah, exactly.
You never did that, did you?
Oh, yes, I did.
Put somebody under a
I think we all
blanket.
did, didn't we?
We would probably pre-sell tickets for this just so we could kind of gauge how well we would be received.
That'd be smart.
But I honestly do think we would probably get in upwards of 200 to 300 cars. So I need a very large spot.
So where are you thinking?
Well, we can talk about that another time. I've got at least a partial agreement, but I need to run some things by our public works guys first. So, next week, if that's a possibility, at least for the movie event, if you would like to have this event, and just providing you an opportunity to engage the community. Again, it could be a nil charge, or you could charge. It's entirely upon you how you want to proceed with that one.
Okay, what's everybody's thoughts? Councilor Foss?
Just one comment. Don't take this as a non-endorsement of it because I think it's a great idea. I just wanted to clarify. You've got it under TEDC committee proposals. Just to be clear, the committee hasn't actually looked at this stuff. I think credit to Greg for developing these ideas.
Or Blaine, yes. These, unfortunately, with outside of the wayfinding and the parklets, others are a bit emerging. Again, because of the opportunity that I saw in Redcliffe, that was only last week that I had heard that. So trying to look for other opportunities and in discussions, there hasn't been time for a meeting for these events.
Yeah, and I appreciate that, and I appreciate the work you're doing in spite of the fact that the committee hasn't got together. And I like the ideas. I think there are some budget challenges with some of this. We've raked the budget a lot to come to where we're at, but I think generally if we can reallocate some of money we've earmarked for events towards the movie thing, I'm not opposed to that.
So you're talking about some of our Heritage Day money? Is that what you're talking about?
Perhaps.
Anyone else have a comment? Ken, I think you did.
I was, go ahead, Councilor Peters.
Yeah, I kind of feel the same as Stuart. Looking at the budget and all the things we've done to twist around and try and make it work, and then looking at possible tax increase for this year and who knows what the future is like. It's challenging to kind of go through that. And I think if there's a way to like Stuart said, to reallocate maybe a couple spots to make some of these work, I don't think we can do all of them. And I think we have to find something that's the best fit for our citizens right now. And I do realize, like, in the economic situation that we have, finding jobs and spending money locally is important. We just have to be really smart about how we do this.
I agree with that. Anyone else have a comment? Councilor Hagee, go ahead.
I was just going to echo what they said. That's exactly what I was going to bring up. There's no other comments were. I do like the movie idea though. And from my understanding, it was a huge success in Redcliffe. Huge success.
Well, I think it's a great idea. We gotta just find the money to do it, I guess.
Mind you, Redcliffe has an old drive-in theater that they could use.
I mean, just for clarification for council too, I mean, yes, we have done some adjusting of our operating budget, and I think there needs to be a bit of a understanding that some of the operating budgets are different than the capital components. We do have the $280,000 of capital that is set aside that hasn't been allocated, and the intent was to have that to be cash flow support to our operations if we needed it. So some of these projects, the drive-in movie event is too small. We couldn't use our that money set aside. It would have to come from our operational budget for Heritage Days per se. But you do have some of that other fund if you did want to allocate some of it to wayfinding signage or parklets or the advertising billboards, where you could and still have a sizable cash flow amount that's available if you did want to take advantage of these. And so why we're bringing this to you is just because in your strategic planning as a council, both years you've identified economic development as a priority. But both years they have gone unfunded. And so and that's totally fine. That is completely at your purview, but we are halfway through your term. And so we're just giving you that opportunity to say, if you are wanting to allocate funding to any of these between now and the end of that term, the window is closing, and it doesn't mean you have to, but there is an opportunity. And just to make sure that you are aware and you can make the most conscious decision that you're wanting to make.
You know, when I think of my knee-jerk reaction to this, especially the movie thing, I think $4,000 for a one-night event. You know, and then I think of economic development, and you know, and I mean, no offense, but I mean, when you're trimming budget and you're raising taxes and you're looking at austerity, I mean, sometimes economic development is the last thing I want to spend money on. But is there a more important time to do economic development than right now? That's just another side of that coin. Really, we need to maybe do a little bit of kickstarting to make sure that our economic development doesn't get completely laid back 12 years because of the COVID stuff like that. Maybe this is the time to do more on economic development than we have in the past. That thought occurred to me. I wonder if anybody has any comments on that.
Yeah, so I'm not sure who's speaking.
Councillor Fox, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I agree, 100% agree that economic development at this point I think is critical. And like, we haven't met as a tourism economic development committee. I'm working on an agenda. One of my proposals in that agenda is that we create sort of a working group that's focused heavily on how we help businesses make it through COVID and recover from COVID. So I 100% agree that we do need to sort of lean in on economic development. I don't know what that looks like yet, exactly. I think some of these things could be certainly, like, I think creating spaces, the parklets, I think those are potential opportunities to grow some downtown businesses. Again, it's a challenge of finding where to fund it when we've raked this so much, but I do think that we do have to find ways to try and drive economic development. And if it means pulling a little, I don't know if there's a little money that we can pull from somewhere, but if there's a way, sure, I'm not opposed to it, for sure.
Anyone else comment?
I was just gonna say that, about the drive-in, I mean, it wouldn't be the end of the world if we had to charge $25 a vehicle or something. I mean, think of it. Nobody's been to a movie or done anything fun for how long?
Months.
I mean, you could even take donations if you wanted, or I don't know. I just think people will be so thrilled to go somewhere that they will.
And we could even go to the Merc or the drugstore or the boutique and buy some treats to put in our cars to take the movie. Seriously, I mean, we could really use this as a shot in the arm.
Well, and then we could even advertise. Oh, the store has this, and this, or special packages of treats for the movies. I don't know.
Get a pizza. Get some takeout, whatever. It could be really a good deal.
I think one thing you could decide to do, which would meet both of those objectives, is you could have an admission, or bring in a current receipt from today of food that you've bought from a local business or something like that, whether it's a restaurant, and that's your admission, right? Because the intent is to provide economic development opportunities, but also mental health supports during this time and just recreational opportunities. So,
holy cow! I'm talking myself into this. I think
That's
this
a
is
good
a
idea.
really good idea.
And I understand the comment you made earlier about, $4,000 for a one night thing. But if you think about,
Heritage Days is $60,000.
yeah, but
for one
yeah,
night.
for one day, but if you think about people's mental state right now in this, I don't think $4,000 is really that much.
But there's the $1,000 discount that we get if we list them as a major contributor too. Has that been factored into the $4,000 price?
That is, yeah.
Yeah, that is, yeah. But the idea of them buying things at the Merc, buying things at the gas station, buying things at Subway or A1 Pizza or Burger Baron, wherever, it's just to put money back into the.
And we can really present this as this opportunity to go support your local businesses, get some treats and bring them money.
And I like Chris's idea about bringing in a receipt from one of those businesses of that day, and that's your admission into the movie.
It's really a
And
fantastic.
that gets people going to local businesses to support local businesses.
I think it's a fantastic idea, really.
Question?
Which one, Councillor Peters?
Yeah, so two things. First thing, I think what Councillor Fromm said, I think I'm buying into this more and more. Have we thought about location? And then my next suggestion is that we do not watch Groundhog's Day.
Yeah. Okay, we'll develop the exclusion list, and that'll take some time, I'm sure. I want some input into that too.
Have you got any ideas of what movies would be available?
So in terms of an outdoor, it's a bit of a shorter list than I have available to me than I do for an indoor movie apparently. So I'm working on the selection of what movies the licensing is available for an outdoor event. Any of the movies that are on that list will be already on DVD, but at this point, I'm not sure anybody will really care. Just like you said, an
Just getting in
opportunity
the car,
Just
going
to
to
get
the
out.
weekend.
to get out.
Yeah, just get out, yeah.
Given that it's May and it's fairly soft outside, I am trying to find a very good spot where we're not going to be ripping up someone's farm field or causing mud bogging or any of those sorts of issues. But I do anticipate if council does greenlight the movie project particularly, we would have a very significant turnout, even from Sterling, places like that, because we're so close. So I'm trying to budget for a large area, more than the town has, other than soccer fields, which I don't want anybody parking on. So.
Yeah.
And bring in people, like, I think you're right, it will bring in people from Sterling McGrath, and with the idea of them having to buy something in Raymond as admission, that brings them into our town, buying things in our town, which boosts our economy.
The challenge we're gonna get into right now is, farmers that are seeding and hay crops that have been starting to grow, so, finding a location is gonna be the big one.
I do have a spot that I've had an agreement from in town from an owner. He's going to hold off on bringing some cattle out to it, Bryce, but we might have to do some trash mowing, but
Okay, good.
Well, if it's on sod, you're pretty safe. If it's on farmland, yeah, you have some rain, some moisture come down, yeah, you'll be getting stuck and it'll be a real problem. But on sod, you can get away with a lot of moisture. You still travel on that.
It's too bad our Sugar City Development Corporation can't get in on this business. They say they do over 300 of these events per year. At $4,000, that's $1 million business. That's a great business.
and well, they're all over Canada, but this particular farm is from Red Deer.
So is everybody okay with this idea? I guess we'll have to come next week at council and make a motion, but what's everybody's thoughts right now? I'm in favor of it.
I like the idea.
I think we gotta change up what we're doing within the community. Probably myself and many others on here. The fact is that our kids and myself are in the same routine every day, and this would be a great way to break out and change the monotony of some of the things that we're going through. And I think Greg had great success with his movies at the theater, and I think that was just starting to tail off, become really bigger than what it was, and then also we had to close it down.
Yeah, I love the idea, especially with the emphasis on having people spend their money locally. I think that's a great little bump we can do. I also wonder if we do sort of pre-roll no-cost advertising for some of our local businesses as well that are trying to get it through this.
Good idea.
And I'm starting to cotton to the idea of the parklets too, because I mean, you put that parklet in front of a particular business, and it brings people there. They're there in front of the business, and they're going to go in and get an ice cream cone, or they're going to go in and get a chocolate bar or whatever. I mean, there's some real virtue to all of these items.
It's just hard to find the budget money to put them in there. So everybody okay with this movie idea? We can get going on that. I'd sure like to see this for July 1st too.
In favor.
We'll try it out now in May.
For July 1st, you can have a midnight movie after fireworks. Come on, let's get serious.
Absolutely.
Who doesn't want to go to a midnight movie? Everybody.
Well, it's hard to get up in the mornings now sometimes.
In fact, look what the movie mill does when they have a midnight movie. They pack the house.
We did our first midnight movie this year, which was the last movie that we did in February for Family Day, and we had over half the theater sold, and it's the first time we'd ever run that here.
Okay. So you can go ahead with that one without a motion, but we'll make a motion next week. The other items, the billboard, the parklets, the wayfinding signage, what's everybody's thoughts there? I know we've gone over and around on this. Is it something that you wanna bring into us next week and see where you think it can fit in? Cause right now, I mean, I have no idea where it's gonna fit in.
I think the wayfinding should be accomplished before we host some games. You know, and
So do I.
thankfully that's been put off for a couple of years. But that's important.
I think there's a certain amount of work on those things, wayfinding parklets, that can be done at no cost through committee work. At some point, we'll have to commit some money to actually make it happen, but I think there is a chance for us to let the committee come up with a more mature proposal to bring back to council, to get an endorsement to actually then spend money on doing these things.
Stuart, if I just add maybe just a slight bit of caution to that, I don't have a problem with that. I think that's wise. However, if you task a committee to do work and then you then further down the road tell them no, you're going to have a very disenchanted and disengaged committee. So I think you need to be prepared, at least in some fashion or form, to follow through financially with some commitment to them. Granted, of course, it meets your expectations and needs.
I would resist that to a degree. I think the role of committees is to generate ideas for council to endorse or not endorse. I think there's freedom for council to see these ideas come a little more maturely back to them, or especially right now as we're struggling to find where we could put money to this. Maybe having it a little more fleshed out will help us be able to jump more securely on it.
And I do believe that the idea of potentially taking 30 grand from our reserve that we have in the capital budget right now that's at 285, if we have a concise wayfinding package that we could operate with, 30 grand from that particular amount is not a significant amount to hurt our cash flow, I don't believe.
No, and just for clarification, we need to have it at 42 because it needs to be 5% of our allocated amount for putting in a grant application.
Whatever it would be,
So
but
42,000 would be the minimum.
we could do that, and we do have money that we're going to be saving. A little bit of money we'll be saving with what we've already allocated for Heritage Days and some of those things that could be reallocated within the budget to accommodate the movie or something else that we might need to do.
Correct. You could do wayfinding in one parklet probably with 42,000 or thereabouts.
But that's something that you could talk to your TED committee, right, Stuart? You could be working with them on
It's on, like I said, I'm developing the agenda for the upcoming meeting. Placemaking, which is wayfinding parklets, is I think a priority item for that committee. We've discussed it a lot, and I think we're pretty well in consensus to move forward with it. So that's on the agenda, as well as economic development, recovery, sort of a working group that can focus on those things. So my intention is to try and get that committee together as soon as possible. And then we can chew on those ideas and bring them a little bit more maturely back.
Yeah, I think I like that idea.
Mayor, I think if we can figure out in the budget to get some of this money for parklets and wayfinding and these things, I think just the actual feel and the morale of the town would be much improved in this a little bit depressing time if it looked like we were moving forward in some positive directions. And I think this would very much show that, in my opinion.
Okay, well, it's something we can discuss next week. It can come back to us. And meanwhile, I guess Councillor Foss will, you're not gonna have a meeting by then, but at least you could have a little more input on that. So the other part of the agenda, or the proposal was those advertising signs. Sounds like there's more of a immediate need to try to get this one decided. What's everyone's take on
What's
this?
the lifetime of those things? They're
Already
10 years old.
So I asked him about that, and he said they're easily fixable. He says if there's any issues, he says right now they've not really had any issues with them. It probably needs a good cleaning, he said. They're just LED panels. They're used to being outside in the elements. I would think we'd get another 10 years out of them.
The one by that pizza place, I look at that one every time I drive by. And it always has a thing flashing on there. They are good advertising.
Yeah.
Good way
The
to-
town of Clare House Home has actually purchased 4 of them that they have going along Highway 3, where that's revenue generated for the town. Because it is such a high traffic corridor now. Our Highway 5 and 4 won't be the same as the traffic going through Clare House Home on the way up to Calgary, but it is an opportunity to create a revenue stream. We don't know exactly what that's gonna look like. We'd have to figure out local conditions, but it is definitely gonna be an opportunity to bring in national advertising if we need to fill the space and to create some revenue and still augment the local opportunities too. So, at worst case scenario for a town to even experiment with one of them, what normally would be 135 grand, and you're gonna try it out for 35, and it's not saying that's not a lot of money still, but there is no better time to try something like this if you deem it appropriate.
Well, we know we can't afford new ones, and it sounds like a great opportunity. I like the idea, but that's just me. I like to go out on a limb, but because I just think could be a revenue creator, and it would be a real feather in our cap, and it would put us on the map, and that's what we like. We like that. That's what we do in Raymond.
Someone suggested going with the town of McGrath on one on Highway 5. I thought that was a good idea too.
Dan and Carson,
And Carson would be in on that
if they
too.
can,
There certainly be some revenue opportunities that
for both them.
I wouldn't necessarily try to navigate through them right now to get a co-ownership,
No.
because that would take too long, but
But national advertising is pretty
there is
exciting.
an opportunity to
Yeah.
pull out outside partners, outside ad agencies, but also include other municipalities easily, whether they'd want in or not, I don't know, but we'll certainly pitch that. Again, I think we've got to look at the sites. Will that site work? Can we pull in? I know there's electricity down that road, so that's not a challenge. We'd have to go with a wireless provider to make sure they can maintain the content. But there's other things there.
It's not just about advertising either. It's a communication element
It
of
is,
that too.
yeah.
It could be very valuable too.
I think if we purchase one, put it out on Highway 5, that intersection up there. I think that towns like McGrath and Carson will approach us to try and purchase part of it from us
They might.
and share.
I'd
Or
be
just rent space.
I'd be happy
Or
to
rent
get the
space.
rent.
Yeah, or just red space for them as well.
Mayor,
Councillor Boss, please.
it wasn't clear to me, is this a two-sided or a single-sided?
Single-sided.
Single, yeah.
That's too bad.
Yeah, I've often thought that, as I drive down that, there's nothing to tell you that Raymond's there and that there are things there. You drive past that intersection, even the one on the other side, I grew up in Sterling and, you drive right past that road to Coaldale or Raymond and there's nothing to say, take a detour. And so I think there's value in this proposal. The fact that we can get these things for so much less than the typical market cost of them, I think is appealing. It does make me a little nervous because I'm like, why is it so much cheaper than the regular price? But what's the lifespan left on these? But I'm open to considering doing this for sure.
So you could buy both of those panels and just put one location and have it double-sided. Right?
Yeah.
So it'd be a little bit cheaper because you'd have just the
one installation.
Just the one installation.
Wow, I think there's some value in that. I do.
Or you can buy both panels, install the one and see what kind of revenue it does generate to see if it's worth installing the other one. And if not, we can put the two panels together,
Well, I
or we
think-
can even sell it.
Yeah, and
right?
Curtis mentioned
You can get
going up
money
to
back.
Highway 4, right? And we would need to approach a business that's on that intersection, to see if they'd be willing to give us some space, which potentially could happen. That would also give us, expanded opportunities. If you double side them, you're probably not gonna double down on your revenue, that's the downside, right?
So Highway 4 and Highway 5 is what you're thinking.
Well, I'm prioritizing Highway 5 only because I'm looking at it from the tourist lens perspective. I'm trying to capture the commuters. I look at who visits Raymond, and it's that 30-minute type of circle, that drive. People that are driving all the way through the border probably aren't going to pull off the road and go to Raymond necessarily. But those that live in McGrath and see that sign every day are going to have that repeated reminder of whatever we're advertising. If it's an event, if it's something that we want people to know about what's going on in Raymond, they're going to finally take that and
5 miles.
Yeah, exactly. So
There's a ton of traffic on that road. I drive the road every day, and it's shocking how much traffic there is. You can't, if you get behind somebody slow, you cannot pass.
both locations definitely have merit. It's not the one. I'm just looking at the other one more so than Highway 4, but.
Not to go Roger Brooks or anything, but if we did have the best cinnamon buns in Alberta and there was a sign right there advertising it, who wouldn't drive in to get one?
Yep.
I would.
Okay,
My wife makes it as a month.
There you go.
But she doesn't sell them.
But she doesn't sell.
She doesn't
She
sell them.
could.
okay. Well, that's interesting discussion we're having here on this. Any other feedback? What do you want him to do? What's your vote on this? It's something he feels we need to jump on now, or it's not gonna be there in another week.
It may.
It may be
It
there.
may. We just don't know. They're advertising to multiple communities, so there is a potential that it may not be, but we can't guarantee that they're going to be sold in a week. So just for proper decision making.
I like it.
So
That's
Joe's in.
30,000 for 250. What normally costs 250,000 to get it to 30,000. That's hard to pass
And
up.
really, can you? It covers itself. Like it.
Yeah.
It
will
is-
pay for
It
itself.
will pay for
At
itself.
some point.
This
Okay.
isn't.
Look at this combination. Okay, so you out on the corner of Highway 52 and 5, you've got a big billboard that says driving in Raymond, and then you've got a driving in Raymond. I mean, holy cow, look at the combinations of things that you could advertise and events like the rodeo or just what we were trying to get in, 13 ways to kill your community. If we could have an event, 3 times a month in Raymond, they were advertising it was pulling people in. Combinations of things like that could really be more than just a shot in the arm for our economic development.
It provides also our local businesses a very large opportunity they probably wouldn't otherwise have.
And community groups.
And our communities.
Exactly.
Well, it also lets people know that are maybe considering moving, that maybe live in Cardston or McGrath. Hey, look at all the stuff that's going on in Raymond. And when they see that, where might they move to? Raymond.
I mean, if there's an event on there all the time about what's happening in Raymond, I mean, it's a happening town. I mean, and you could really make that known to more than just people on Raymond area discussions.
Right. I like it.
To me, this is more important than the parklets or the wayfaring signs. This is wayfinding signs. This is big. Right? This is huge.
There's a huge potential. I really believe there is.
I agree.
Good idea.
You're
You're
So,
saying
I'm
220
not-
personal.
The other day from McGrath, and again, the rumors of a Dairy Queen coming to Raymond. They're excited. They're not going to move to Raymond, but they're excited with the 12 or 10-minute commute from McGrath to Raymond to come get Dairy Queen. If we had a sign out there somewhere along that corridor where people knew they could come for pizza, Burger Baron, Subway, the Merc, all these different places, and they would maybe headed to Water somewhere for an evening or afternoon. They could pop in and grab something and then head back out.
Yeah, sure. Lots of merit there, seriously.
Okay. So what do you want to do? We got, we have our budget, we'll be doing this next week on our budget, but I guess you says we can put this in there somewhere? What
Well,
you
you
trying
have
to tell us?
$280,000 of unallocated MSI cap for capital grant money that we were reserving for cash flow. And so even if you added up the minimum would have to be $42,000, which is 5%, the minimum we need to put in an application. But even if you did include, for argument's sake, the 89,000 that was requested, you still have roughly $200,000 set aside for cash flow support if it's needed. If we don't need it, that's money that can either go to pay off debt or be used to go into future capital projects in 2021.
Okay,
And that's capital, that's not operational.
Correct.
So it's not, that's not why we're raising the taxes.
No, correct.
And that's a message that needs to get out there
Yeah.
to everybody.
The reason
put
the
that
taxes
message
may
on
be
the
going up are strictly
Yeah.
because of provincial downloaded expenses.
Yes.
Nothing that you
But we
want.
need to let the public know that our taxes aren't going up because we put a parklet downtown. you know?
Seriously, that's
Yeah.
seminal right now.
That
We
is.
didn't raise your taxes so that we could do a drive-in movie.
Yeah.
Or so that we could do,
Because that's what people are gonna think, they're gonna see a parklet, or they're gonna see this big sign or something.
Two separate
The first thing
pools
they're
of
gonna say
money.
is,
Yeah.
well, no wonder my taxes went up, right?
Two separate pools of money that aren't connected.
Can I just interject one thing here?
sure.
The capital project would not be, we've already allocated projects to all of our MSI capital and federal gas tax money for 2020. So any new project would have to come out of that $285,000 profitability or cash flow that we were gonna have.
Is that gonna make our cash flow, have a problem if we don't have that extra money sitting there?
No, 285,000, if you're gonna spend $45,000 on that, you still have $240,000 in cash flow for that, so.
Yeah, like Ralph said, that's not a significant amount of money.
But it keeps getting bigger now, it's at 89, 30.
Well, that's just all of your options, right? Yeah.
And it would only be 85, because 4,000 can't be funded out of that. That's operational.
Okay, everybody understand that?
I think so.
So I am bringing this back to committee, or to council meeting next week for official motions, but are we getting the direction to proceed with booking a time for the drive-through so that can be scheduled?
I think so.
And
Is
the
everybody okay
billboards?
with that?
I am.
And the billboards, you want him to be looking into that?
I'm not trying to lead the discussion, I just want to make sure I fully understand what you're requesting.
I think there's an opportunity there that we need to kind of jump on,
I do
you know,
too.
in both cases.
I do too.
I think right now I'm comfortable supporting the billboard and the movie right now. As far as parklets, I'm not sure if I'm there yet.
I'm with you there, Councillor Peters, but we'll have Councillor Frost bring that back to us. Okay, everybody okay with that?
I let your thumbs up.
I thought they're doing it, I better do it too.
Thumbs up from everybody?
So we'll bring it all back to
Okay.
council next week, but administration will proceed on the billboards and on the
Movie.
drive-through movie ahead of time.
Okay. Let's move on then. 4.8, the utility relief request. Everybody have a chance to see this email?
Yes.
This is a tough one, I think.
It is.
Before you went live stream, when I was just here with council, I just asked them exactly what are we talking about, how much money, and it's $105 a month. A little bit more than our residential money that's required from us for our homes. It's $105.
I got a question. Are we gonna have a whole bunch more people jump in on this if we give this relief request?
That's the next part of what we talked about, Councillor Peters, is, you have the schools, you have other churches, you have
Any government buildings,
any government buildings,
so the hospital,
post office.
I don't believe we can do this because we're setting a precedence and, I would love to do this, but I don't really think we can because we would be setting a bad precedence, I believe.
so for public institutional use, and this is just a a rough estimate off the top of my head, but I believe it would be about $1,000 a month. You'd be roughly, if everybody requested, or if you did a blanket deferral for any public or institutional entity for a specific period of time. I mean, you could just say, sure, for 3 months instead of going the whole year like you've done before. I mean, you could potentially go that route, but it would be about $1,000 a month if you did a full bore for all of the public institutional entities in town.
Mayor,
Yes, Councillor Price.
is Reverend Litchfield aware of the fact that we've already waived interest penalties, which would give him the option to defer payment literally for several months to allow things to settle down, and perhaps his cash flow would return to where it needs to be, and then he could take care of the payment before the interest comes due anyway.
I believe they are aware, but we could reach out. I think they're identifying that as a not-for-profit, they're donation-based, and their parishioners may be in difficult situations, and so their ability to maybe make up for lost cash flow might be stretched, I think is the argument. I haven't spoken with them directly, I've just received the email, but I could be mistaken.
One thing in the email, it does say that they're requesting some level of relief. I'm not sure if that means it's all or nothing. If we decide that we would like to maybe provide relief for some of these groups, a certain percentage or a number that shows we're passionate, but we're not going to go all in.
Councillor Fox.
Question. What is in that 105 roughly? Or is it one single fee, or is that made up of several things?
It's a $28 water commercial rate, a $28 wastewater commercial rate, a $28 solid waste commercial rate, and then a $7 reserve fee for both water, wastewater, and solid waste.
Marty.
I do have a question.
Sure.
Have you considered the fact that there are several businesses in town that have also closed their doors and are not making any revenue? And if you open the door to them, to this church, you're also going to open the door to all these businesses that have closed down.
I was just gonna say,
That's a comment I was gonna make too. We said $1,000 a month for public buildings, but then you add all the businesses on top of that.
Yeah, it's a different zoning, so there's different opportunities for sure.
Yeah, so.
Councillor Harker, you got muted somehow, so we didn't hear you.
I was gonna say, I know that dental offices don't have any patients, and their overhead is absolutely staggering. By the way, I'll just mention that. I won't say the amount, it's staggering. So I don't know. Where do you start, where do you stop?
There's a conflict in this anyway, because due to this, we're not and will not be consuming any water, using sewage or needing refuse removal. But then the last paragraph, the largest portion of our town utility billing is not dependent on actual use of offset fees. So I mean, it's not a big deal that they're not using it so much, but I do think it's opening the door to too much. There are too many people suffering from this, and I think some consideration, we just need to bring it to everybody's attention that we will not be charging fees. You know, we're not going to demand payment on time. The day will come, you know, when we'll have fundraisers in the buildings and pass the plate around and things like that, but there's still opportunity for people to donate. Plenty of opportunity. You know, if they want to keep the utilities going on a building that's not being used. You know, for churches in particular.
Mayor?
Councillor Price.
In addition, the fact that we've waived those penalties to December 31st, I think council has the ability on a one-time basis to forgive penalties going forward. So if there were still issues going into the new year, we potentially could, on an individual basis, make a decision about waiving an interest penalty on those fees.
Good idea. And it is $100,000 hit for us to waive those fees, those penalties. You know, and that's a
Yeah.
considerable concession, you know, for a community our size to make, I think. That's a big chunk of budget right there. I wouldn't dare go any further, really.
I wouldn't either.
I agree. I think we've done our part and it's very equitable. We haven't singled anybody out. We haven't made any preferences, but we have done what we can and it is equitable. And I don't know, I don't think we can open that can of worms where we start picking and choosing what we're gonna do for people who are, by the way, there's a lot of people that have very similar circumstances.
Plus, I think we've gone till January 1st of 2021, not just June, you know, 30th of 2020. We've gone months longer than
Yeah,
many
half a year
communities.
more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have
We've
gone,
gone longer than other communities have.
Sure.
which is a major concession. That's not a minor one, I think.
Major, yeah, it's $100,000 hit is what we're taking on this.
I think we should respond to him in that manner, that, you know, we've made concessions on interest and penalties. That gives him time that gives him 6 or 8 months here to plan and sort out what he might need to do in order to meet those costs before December 31st. I wouldn't plant the idea that we would waive things after that, but when that time comes, that's an option. But I just think we need to fall back on what we've done and encourage him to do his best to, you know, he doesn't have to pay for right now. Take a look at his budget and determine if he can swing it in some way to accomplish what needs to be done.
Councillor Foss.
I think in the end of this, we're gonna have to make some hard decisions about how we help businesses, nonprofits, everything in our community to come out of this. And I think that will be easier when we're further down to look back and say, you know, what can we do to help you in a recovery mode versus preemptively right now where I think we just don't know enough yet. But I would say when we respond to them, perhaps that's some messaging that we want to help all our nonprofits, businesses, whatever it might be, to be able to continue to operate in Raymond. And so to remain in communication with us, we'll try to see what we can do to work with you. But it's for now, the option on the table is to not pay, and you won't risk any penalty.
Good point.
Yep. Okay, I think it's loud and clear how we're gonna answer him. I think a letter is the way we should.
So I'll draft that letter and I'll email it out to council. If you could just check your email between now and the end of the week, just to make sure that the flavor is what you're anticipating, and then we can send it off.
Okay, sounds good. Okay with everybody? Okay. The next part on the agenda, it's not on there, but we talked about adding it, and that was the COVID-19. This has been a really interesting week. Ever since Thursday, Dr. Henshaw's announcement, I am not kidding, I've probably had at least 24 people either drop by, see me on the street, phone me, and they're all interested in they all have the same concern, and I think everyone's been pretty unanimous about it. When they first came out 2 months ago or a month ago about flattening the curve, we've all tried to flatten the curve. We've all been really good about it. But when they come out and are making more announcements that this is going to last all summer, is there an appetite from anyone here that maybe the town needs to write a letter on behalf of the town saying, you know, when is it time that we take the responsibility upon ourselves and not have all these restrictions on us? There was an appetite, I know, from the province to start loosening some of these restrictions. And so is there an appetite from the town that maybe we should be writing a letter from the town of Raymond just saying, hey, maybe we need to be loosening some of these restrictions? Any comments from anybody?
Actually, I was really interested in Mr. Steed's report tonight because in reality, it all depends on how much longer this goes. And I'll just be honest with you all. I am taking a convoy to Edmonton tomorrow. I'm not doing it on behalf of the town, but we have doctors, dentists, business people that are convoying, meeting at the legislature. And friendly rally, we will be maintaining social distancing and doing what we can do. But I was interested in his comment talking about how we could do what we wanted. My big argument is it's like a one size fits all. And I kind of feel like maybe we don't fit into the city of Calgary's model quite so much. So, I mean, if this goes on for a lot longer, I mean, Greg gave us the numbers about businesses that, wouldn't open, or their reduced revenue. I know some businesses that have zero revenue, not just a loss of 50%. So the question is, how long can they do that? And at what point are we turning our backs on the people that we serve and their basic rights? We have basic rights. And at what point are we turning our back on those people if we don't help figure something out? I don't feel good about just following. If the province is going to follow the Prime Minister, I don't know where I stand on that. And I may have to say, I think we should declare a state of emergency, have our liability, and do what we need to do for our area. And that's my opinion right there.
I'm not sure about that, because I'm not sure I want to declare a solo and then open up the golf course. I think that would not be the right thing to do. But I really believe in some of the things they're doing are right. I think our seniors need to still have those restrictions on people visiting them and what they're doing for them. And one other thing that I think that's come out is, I think we've all learned how to social distance. I think that needs to
Absolutely. We've had a lot of practice. So we've had all that practice. I'm not saying that we shouldn't be cautious, but if you've watched some of the doctors and the people that I've watched, they're saying it's unprecedented. It's unprecedented that you would isolate well people. We should be isolating the sick and those that are immunocompromised. And so that's where I'm having a really hard time is our businesses are shut because they can't be open. And are we turning our backs on our residents because we won't say we don't agree with what's going on in the province? And I don't know what that looks like. I talked to the mayor. I said, I don't know how you do that. But
So is there any appetite from
I'm
anyone
worried.
else?
I'm really worried.
Besides Joan and I, Councillor Price?
If we're writing a letter, I just request that I don't have any input in the letter. They would not like what I have to say. I agree 100% with what Joan and you're talking about is we're under undue pressure, being compared to people that we don't need to be compared to, and we need some more rights and freedoms in our own bailiwick, in our own community, to make some of these decisions.
Thank you, Ralph. I thought I was the only one. You should be going on the trip with us tomorrow.
My wife would be happy to, probably.
Great.
Well, like I said, I've had people just stop by, and even this morning, 9 o'clock in the morning, I had someone come over and talk to me. I mean, I don't know, when do we have to take responsibility for ourselves on this too. I mean, I don't want people to die either, but I mean, this is an interesting part of life that we're having right now. Anybody else? Councillor Foss?
This one's challenging because I do agree this is putting a lot of stress on our businesses, and it's going to be hard to come out of this. But I'm not comfortable with Raymond leading the way on reopening things. I'm comfortable with following, and I think the province is on the edge of outlining the recovery plan and how that looks. I'm comfortable waiting to see what that looks like before doing much advocacy at this point. I think they're planning to do that in the next couple of days, and I'd like to see what that looks like first.
For sure. I had one person say that to me too. They'd like to see how it worked in these other states that are opening up and down in the States and Saskatchewan, just to see how that worked. But everybody else has been talking the way that we're talking. But no, I'm not saying we lead the way. I'm just saying we just write a letter stating that we'd like to see them lessen some of the restrictions on us.
Mayor?
Councillor
That's
Price?
where I think the next, sorry.
Go ahead, Councillor Foss, finish your comment.
That's what I was saying. I think waiting to see what the province lays out in the next, I think it's in the next 48 hours or so, would be useful in framing, if we do write a letter, and framing that letter with, with what, in response to what they're actually planning.
So I don't mind that because they will have some, I'm sure, a 5-level response too of how to get the economy going again and how to lessen these restrictions. But I think with the next council meeting, we should try to draft something up. Councillor Peters?
No, Mayor?
Councillor Price, I'm sorry.
I was just saying that, yeah, I am not adverse to waiting to see what the initial plans are. We do have a history in leading when it comes to things here in Raymond, though, and I'm not necessarily adverse to being one of the first if it were appropriate within the guidelines that they are providing us, if we had some ideas that would be of importance to move forward on.
Councillor Fromm?
I think we can do both. I mean, Dina Hinshaw has stated on several occasions how much pressure she's facing, and I think we're starting to see it unravel a little bit. We are talking about opening up in Quebec and Ontario and Saskatchewan, and we're talking about opening up in Georgia, and kids are going back to school in certain parts next week, at least elementary kids. We're starting to see it unravel a little bit, and I think we have to wait. I mean, did you all witness the seriousness of our DEMs? Almost a plea to, I would definitely appreciate if you would follow the federal and provincial guidelines. And I think we all stood there and agreed with them. But I mean, to write a letter and still comply with all of the provincial guidelines is possible. And we can be the squeaky wheel and let them know how we feel all we want. And maybe it'll help them make some future decisions. But I still think we need to follow the provincial guidelines. When there are orders that come out from Dean Hinshaw, we need to follow them, period. And I think that's really important, but we can still do both. I mean, Joan, good luck tomorrow. I mean, I hope that you have some effect on the powers that be up there. I really do. And I think that the more we write letters, or the more we let them know how much things are hurting down here, even in the South, I think that we can do both.
It is a democracy.
But we have to do one. It is a democracy, yes, and our rights are severely cramped. But when we talk about our basic rights, I don't know. That's getting a little bit. I don't know. Never mind. I was going to say it's getting a little bit radical, but it's not really. It's really.
It's really not. I talked to Grant Nelson for a long time on Saturday, and he said he has had call after call after call from business people who have put everything in their life into their businesses. They don't have RSPs, they don't have savings, and now if they don't run their businesses for months, they will be financially ruined, and that's not pretty. And if we want to talk about health, let's talk about the leading cause of disease, which is the effects of stress. Okay, let's talk about stress. And the other thing he talked about is suicide. And he said, I'm working the numbers, but there's been more deaths from suicide than from COVID-19. I don't know, that frightens me personally.
And again, more power to you. I think that they need to hear from us, and they need to hear from your convoy, your delegation, but we also need to comply with provincial guidelines. So we need to do both, in my opinion.
I agree.
I agree.
Council.
And we're being very safe, and we're doing social distancing, and families only in cars, and, you know, we're picking up some other doctors and some dentists in Lethbridge, and, you know, we're being, this is a very positive demonstration. This is nothing mean.
Excellent.
We're just letting them know that we need to get Albertans back to work.
And we're seeing
That
lots
it's
of doctors.
essential. It's essential. It's not, it's a matter of life and death for a lot of these people.
Which is really what COVID's all about, a matter of life and death. So good points. But there are a lot of doctors coming out and speaking about this, and a lot of medical associations, and you know, in the states that are coming out and saying all this stuff that really needs to be taken into account. I mean, there are costs that are as big as, you know, 3,000 deaths that are comparable, you know, on the national scale, and they're starting to listen. More and more information is coming out, and I think we're seeing it unravel at least.
For sure. The projections aren't near what they thought they were gonna be.
Yeah.
And they're gonna come out with new projections, I think, too.
We've got some
I
doctors
watched
that
the
are
new,
really
I
smart
watched
at
the
getting
new
it shot.
projections just about 5 o'clock, and they are, they're not nearly what they thought they would be. You can watch that news release, but they're way less than what they thought they would be, which is really good news. That's really good news, and
sure.
maybe that will sway some of their decisions, hopefully. But it's we can't have 25% unemployment rate without complete devastation, financially, physically, emotionally. It's not going to be pretty.
Okay, I think Curtis has a comment. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, obviously, council, you're welcome to take whatever direction you want to go with advocacy and also with declaring a state and local emergency if you deem that necessary. I think, though, just some caution. I mean, hindsight is going to be very valuable in this. This has never been experienced in our history, in modern day life. There's not many people who survived Spanish flu still alive, which is probably the next comparable scenario. And so there's going to be a lot of opportunities to look back and say, we could have done this, we couldn't have done this, we shouldn't have done this. I think there needs to be some caution, though. Up until a week ago or so, and I don't know the exact date, the South Zone was the lowest in the province. We're now the second highest. And that's strictly because of an outbreak at a facility. And yes, you can talk about, I've heard, you know, different living conditions and cultures and all that other things, but the reality is that it spreads very quickly. And so even in Saskatchewan and these other places where they're talking about openings, it's phased over months. And Alberta's talking about opening in May. There's a news article right now. CBC with Premier Kenney talking about staggered approaches in May. And so even though they are talking about it, it's not going to be business as usual until towards the end of this year anyway, because it's going to be that delayed approach. And so I just want to emphasize potentially some caution where I think definitely we can do advocacy, but I think it's might be a bit premature to say that, and I probably shouldn't even say this, but I'm having a hard time not listening to my inside voice. There are problems that people face. Mental illness is definitely nothing to scoff at, but these are first world challenges. We still have Netflix, we still have heat, we have all these other challenges that we are facing, yes, that are important, but this is a pretty easy challenge to manage as best we can when we're trying to put other people's health and safety. I'm not minimizing the challenges it has for people who are financially struggling, and that's where the government needs to step in. And we can assess that after it's deemed, but I think there needs to be some caution in how we present that message. And I know Councillor Hark has made a very good point of emphasizing that she's not acting on behalf of the town in this instance. But if council did want to make it more of a formal nature, that's definitely in your right. We definitely can do that. I think we just need to manage how we do that.
For sure.
I agree.
There are communities in Alberta that are petitioning the government to do more, like to shut down more. Like
Yeah.
we're not the only side of the story, you know. But you know, the province and the federals they've got some skin in the game too. I mean, it's not good for Alberta to let everybody in South Zone or Lac La Biche or High Prairie or anywhere else go under. I mean, there's some real skin in the game from the province too. And I don't think Dina Hinshaw's gonna call the shots forever. I don't believe that.
Okay. So I kinda got the feeling we'll wait till next week, see what the province comes up with, and maybe next week it can be on the agenda and we can either go forward or not. Everybody okay with that?
Sounds great to me.
I'm getting thumbs up, okay. Last on.
Bring this
item on-
back to council next week.
Yes.
Okay.
Last item on the agenda is, Councillor Hague, you want to talk about cemeteries?
Thanks, Mayor, I almost forgot about that.
Yeesh, that's a terrible segue from COVID-19 to cemetery.
Yeah. Just like.
No, that is funny.
It's been brought to my attention out of the cemetery that, we are making some improvements out there, you know, with the gazebo and stuff like that. Is there some way we can have Richard, somebody look at the cost of, I think we're missing a road out there. If you go out there, the road trees that's on the east end of the cemetery, like all headstones face east, right? Well, the headstones that face east on the west side of that row of trees are face the trees and there's no road on there, so people are driving there, but they're just driving on the grass.
Are they really?
Yes, there's some tire tracks out there. So as you go up and down the rows, you can go to the east side of all the headstones and see all the names, but that one row of headstones, you can't see the names. So there's no road there.
And those trees are pretty big.
And those trees are pretty
Too bad
big,
that
and so
we
the
didn't turn
headstones,
all those headstones around to face
yeah,
west.
and all headstones face east, right?
Yeah.
So, but it's been brought to my attention that some people are driving on the grass there, so they can drive by and they can see the headstones as they drive by. Is there any way we can get some cost of what it costs to put a road right by those trees?
Wow.
Like, I don't know, I just,
Yes, we could definitely look into
Yeah,
that and
just
find
see what the cost
options for
is.
sure.
Yeah, I'm sure it would be much. Well, did you look into Councillor Fromm's, idea of not building a structure, so to say, but have some kind of board that's behind glass? Did you look into that?
Yeah, we did look into it. When we did reach out to the individual that kind of started this process and presented what we had thought would be, what we had budgeted and planned out, and it is a gazebo structure. The only challenge we felt with the sign and the gazebo structure is gonna be fairly affordable. It's about $8,900, I think, for the structure. The reason we decided to go with the structure though versus the board was just because there's a bit more shelter from the out. Typically those that are going and looking at the book aren't eager to be outside in the elements necessarily. And so there was some seating capacity and some shelter from the elements in that sense, and it does protect that book a bit stronger. And it did fit in with the overall design of creating kind of an entryway into the courtyard that we're going to be having where the columbariums are going to be placed. And so we did pass it by the individual that brought it up, and she was very pleased with what was presented. And so we did carry on with that. If that was premature, we can stop because nothing's been purchased yet. We've just discussed and had it priced out.
I've just seen some really nice things that were just like a bird feeder. You know, there's the board, and then there's that nice sheltered roof, but it's not sheltered from our elements. You know, I've seen a lot of those in Utah, but they're really quite classy. I'm not.
I stopped by and looked at the Japanese cards that you saw, and
And
it's nice.
isn't it?
Yeah, it's very nice.
But I'm sure not opposed to what is being done. at all.
You're not going grave watching and looking if you're out in the elements anyway and it's snowing or.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I'm thinking, I'm gonna avoid the cemetery in those days.
Right, who just commented?
Price.
Councillor Price?
Just in the back of my head, this is a side note on that roadway. Seems like there is a monument or something at the top end of that area.
There is.
I
There is.
don't know if that will interfere with the road or not, but just be sure we're looking at that in our.
The veterans monument right at the head of the road.
Yeah, there is Councillor Price, I just thought we should check it out to see if we could somehow get around that.
Okay,
We will definitely look into it and bring an update back later.
Thank you.
okay. Anybody else have anything? If not, we're at the end of our meeting, so we're just gonna have an adjournment. We don't need a motion. So I guess this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Good night.
Right.